3 months after signing the divorce papers, a man once hailed as a symbol of New York's success suddenly spotted his ex-wife in the middle of a crowded Manhattan street. But she was no longer the exhausted woman who had once waited silently for him inside a cold penthouse. Now, she walked with quiet strength, one hand resting gently on her rounded belly. In that instant, his heart staggered. The world he had built, towering skyscrapers, billion-dollar deals, suddenly felt meaningless. Could any of it ever replace a child, a family, the life he had thrown away? The man who once made Wall Street bow now stood frozen like a beggar with nothing. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't look away from her figure. And in his mind, one searing question echoed over and over: was that child his? The sounds of cars, footsteps, and voices rushed around him. Yet in that moment, time itself seemed to stop. This was no chance encounter. It was the beginning of a reckoning, a journey of remorse, and perhaps his final chance at redemption. If you've ever believed that money and fame can't fill the emptiness of a heart, stay until the very end of this story. Don't forget to let us know where you're watching this video from. The penthouse glittered like a museum. Glass walls, rare paintings, marble floors. Everything shone, yet everything felt hollow. Adrian sat at his desk, staring at the divorce papers waiting in front of him. His hand rested on a sleek fountain pen. It was not just any pen. Years ago, Selena had given it to him when he closed his first investment deal. Back then, it symbolized love, faith, and the promise of a future. Now, the same pen felt heavy, almost cruel. He twirled it between his fingers, remembering her smile the day she placed it in a gift box. That smile no longer belonged to him. The silence in the penthouse pressed against his chest. No laughter echoed through the halls, no soft voice called his name. Only the hum of the air conditioning filled the void. He pressed the pen down. The ink touched paper. His name stretched across the page, sealing the end. The world outside sparkled with light, but inside, Adrian felt the sharp sting of loss. A symbol that once meant devotion had become the tool of separation. Money had bought him the pen, the penthouse, the empire. But it could not buy back her heart. The next morning, the door stood open. Selena appeared in the hallway, her hand gripping the strap of an old leather bag. It was worn, frayed at the edges, but sturdy. She had packed only the essentials. She did not want his luxury, his art, or his imported furniture. She only wanted freedom. Adrian's eyes followed her movements. He wanted to stop her, but his pride held him in place. Around them, the penthouse gleamed with wealth. Italian leather couches, a grand piano, walls filled with priceless paintings. Yet, none of it could hold her. She paused by the door. For one moment, her hazel eyes softened, as if searching for the man she once loved. But all she saw was the life that had drowned them. Her voice trembled, but it carried strength. "This world isn't mine. I can't breathe here anymore." The bag swung against her hip as she stepped out. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed louder than any argument they had ever had. Adrian stood frozen. Surrounded by gold and glass, he realized none of it mattered. The bag on her shoulder was plain, yet it carried more meaning than all his riches combined. That night, New York pulsed with life. Lights burned from Times Square to Central Park. Horns echoed in the streets, crowds moved like rivers. But inside the penthouse, Adrian sat alone. He poured a glass of rare scotch, aged longer than most marriages lasted. The liquid glowed amber in the crystal glass. He lifted it, hoping it might numb the ache in his chest. The first sip burned, but not enough. The second sip was bitter, sharper than he expected. By the third, he understood. No amount of alcohol could drown the silence. The city celebrated outside. Deals were made, power was traded. People laughed in expensive restaurants. But Adrian, the man who once owned every room he entered, now owned only emptiness. He set the glass down. His reflection in the window stared back at him. Sharp suit, polished watch, hollow eyes. He had achieved the dream. Wealth, power, respect. Yet in losing her, he had never felt poorer. The hum of the city went on, but in his chest only cold spread. He realized the cruel paradox. He had everything, and nothing at all. Hundreds of miles away, Selena arrived in Asheville, North Carolina. The city was smaller, slower, almost quiet compared to Manhattan. The first breath she took outside the bus station felt different, cleaner, freer. She carried her leather bag into a small rental house on a tree-lined street. The shutters needed paint, the yard was overgrown, the kitchen tiles were cracked, but the air inside was light. She could finally exhale. Boxes filled the living room, labeled in her careful handwriting. Books, kitchen, miscellaneous. She set them down and stood still. No buzzing phone, no glass towers looming outside the window, just silence, birdsong, and the rustle of leaves. Selina walked onto the porch. Across the street, an elderly couple strolled hand in hand, laughing softly. A pang touched her chest. It was not envy, but longing. For something simple. For a love that breathed. The house was far from glamorous, but it was hers. It was not suffocating like the penthouse. Here she could rebuild, piece by piece, without shadows of wealth pressing on her. For the first time in years, Selina felt a flicker of hope. The world she had left behind no longer defined her. She could breathe again. Alone in his penthouse, Adrian drifted back to the past. He saw Selina sitting cross-legged on their old sofa, her hair tied loosely, a book open in her lap. It was The Great Gatsby. She loved to read it aloud, her voice alive with feeling. She said Gatsby had everything, yet was empty, chasing a dream that could never satisfy him. Adrian had laughed at the time. He teased her for loving a tragic character. He told her wealth and ambition were not curses, but blessings. Back then, he believed it with his whole heart. Now, the memory cut deeper than any blade. He finally understood what Selina had seen. Adrian had become Gatsby himself, surrounded by riches, celebrated by strangers, but hollow inside. The lines she once recited echoed in his mind. He had everything, but he was still searching. Adrian pressed his palm against his forehead. He wished he had listened more, cared more, loved more. The image of her soft smile, her glowing eyes, made his chest ache. He had dismissed her wisdom once. Tonight, it felt like prophecy. The book was gone from the shelf, but its lesson remained. She had seen his emptiness before he ever did. Days passed, and Adrian threw himself into work. Newspapers called him the next Elon Musk. Investors praised his genius. Magazine covers showed his sharp jawline, his tailored suits, his empire of technology. He was the face of innovation, the man everyone wanted to know. Crowds clapped when he spoke at conferences. Cameras flashed at every gala. His name trended online. His quotes were repeated in business schools. To the world, he was untouchable. But when the lights dimmed and the doors closed, silence came rushing back. The hotel rooms felt colder. The boardrooms felt smaller. No matter how many hands he shook, no one truly held him. The irony stabbed him with each headline. The louder the applause grew, the emptier his chest felt. He had spent years chasing glory, and when it arrived, it left him lonelier than ever. Adrian scrolled through glowing articles on his phone, yet all he could think of was Selina's quiet laugh, her steady presence, the home they once dreamed of building together. The world believed he had won. In truth, he had lost. And no headline, no deal, no celebration could cover the hollow space inside his heart. To escape the ache, Adrian let himself be pulled into another world. Her name was Vivian Blake, a former model turned socialite. She was elegant, polished, always draped in designer silk. With her on his arm, cameras loved him even more. Vivian spoke of fashion shows, parties, the newest circles of power. Her laughter sparkled at every table, but it never reached her eyes. Their dinners were filled with chatter about names, brands, and appearances. She admired his money, he admired her beauty, but beyond that, there was nothing. Every smile felt rehearsed, every kiss felt staged. Adrian could not shake the comparison. Vivian was everything Selina was not. Selina had been warm, patient, willing to sit in silence beside him. Vivian feared silence. She filled it with gossip, with noise, with surface shine. Adrian knew it was a performance, a mask to distract himself from his own regret. Yet he played along, pretending he was fine, pretending Vivian was enough. But each time she laughed too loudly, each time she posed for attention, he felt Selina's absence more sharply. Vivian was the perfect accessory for his world of wealth, but she was not love, not even close. Every evening, as the sun slid down over Manhattan, Adrian felt a sharp pull inside. The orange glow against the glass towers was beautiful, but it was also unbearable. Each sunset reminded him of Selina. She used to drag him out onto the balcony, insisting he pause his work, insisting he look at the sky. "Stop counting minutes, Adrian," she would whisper. "Just watch the colors." She found peace in something simple. He found annoyance back then. He always rushed back to emails, to calls, to deals. Now he sat alone by the same balcony doors, the glass cold against his back. The sky painted itself with fire, but there was no one beside him to share it. His phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. No message could fill this silence. The city pulsed, but inside him, only emptiness spread. He realized that the moments he once brushed off were the ones he longed for most. Her laughter, the way she leaned into his arm, the warmth of her hand in his. The sunsets had not changed. He had. And now, every evening, they haunted him like ghosts of what he had thrown away. One sleepless night, Adrian sat at his desk, his eyes burning from hours of staring at nothing. He opened his laptop. Without thinking, his fingers typed one word: Asheville. He remembered Selena mentioning it once, her voice soft with longing. A place with art, mountains, and air that felt alive. He had dismissed it then. Tonight, it felt like the only place he could breathe. A flight left the next day. He booked it instantly. No hesitation, no plan, only an ache that demanded action. He closed the laptop and leaned back. For the first time in months, a strange calm filled his chest. The next morning, he told his assistant he was leaving indefinitely. Her eyes widened. "But, sir, the board—" He cut her off. "Handle it." The words felt final. By the afternoon, he was gone. The empire, the headlines, the endless meetings, he left them all behind. As the plane took off, Adrian stared out the window. The skyline of New York shrank until it was only a line of light in the distance. His heart pounded with fear and hope. For the first time in years, he was chasing something money could not buy. The car rolled out of Asheville's small airport and into winding streets lined with trees. Adrian pressed his hand against the window, taking in the sight. No glass towers, no endless noise, only the Blue Ridge Mountains rising in the distance, wrapped in mist. The driver pointed toward the hills. "That's where the colors are brightest in autumn," he said. Adrian nodded, his throat tight. It was nothing like New York. Downtown passed in a blur of coffee shops, art galleries, and people strolling at an easy pace. No one rushed. No one seemed chained to their phones. Couples walked hand in hand. Families laughed on sidewalks. The rhythm was slower, softer. The car climbed toward his hotel, a historic inn built of stone, overlooking the valley. When he stepped out, the air met him, cool, crisp, and sharp with pine. He inhaled deeply, and for the first time in years, he felt something shift. It was quiet here, too quiet for a man used to deals and deadlines. Yet, beneath the stillness was peace, the kind Selena had always searched for. Adrian stood still, staring at the mountains. For the first time, he wondered if peace was possible for him too. The next morning, Adrian wandered through Asheville's quiet streets. Cafes spilled music onto sidewalks. Local artists displayed paintings of mountains and rivers. For a moment, he almost forgot why he came. Then a flyer caught his eye. It was taped to a lamppost, edges curled from the wind. Willow Haven Women's Shelter. The bold letters seemed to leap from the page. A drawing of open hands cradling a small house rested beneath the title. Adrian froze. His chest tightened. Selena had spoken once, long ago, about helping women rebuild their lives, a dream he had dismissed as impractical. Now, here it was, alive in front of him. He reached out, fingers brushing the paper. A whisper inside told him this was no coincidence. She could be there. She could be behind those doors, working, living, waiting. His heart pounded as he memorized the address. For the first time since leaving New York, his steps carried purpose. Every block, every turn, felt heavy with possibility. Adrian clenched the flyer in his hand. If fate had brought him here, he would follow. Somewhere inside that shelter, he believed, was the woman he had lost, and perhaps the only chance left to make things right. The shelter was modest, a brick building with peeling paint and a garden of wildflowers out front. Adrian's polished shoes crunched against the gravel as he walked to the entrance. His chest felt tight, each step heavier than the last. The door creaked open. Voices floated from inside, soft, steady, filled with life. Then, suddenly, she appeared. Selena stepped out into the sunlight. Her hair was tied back, her face calm but tired. One hand rested gently on her rounded belly. For a moment, she didn't see him. She adjusted the strap of her bag and glanced toward the garden. When her eyes lifted and met his, the world seemed to stop. Adrian froze. His throat closed. The sight of her, the curve of her stomach, the guarded strength in her gaze, struck him harder than any boardroom defeat. Selina's breath caught. Shock flickered across her face, quickly replaced by something colder, heavier. Neither spoke. The silence between them carried years of pain, choices, and regret. Adrian wanted to move, to reach out, but his feet refused. He could only stand there, caught between the past and the future, staring at the woman who had once been his whole world. The silence broke with her voice, steady, sharp, cutting straight to the bone. "Why are you here, Adrian?" He opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. For months he had rehearsed speeches, apologies, promises. None of them fit now. He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on her. "I was wrong," he whispered. His voice cracked. "I lost sight of what mattered. I lost sight of you." Selina's arms tightened across her chest. Her expression did not soften. "Do you think saying that changes anything? Do you think showing up here erases the years I begged for your time?" Adrian's chest ached. He wanted to explain, to lay bare every regret, but the truth was simple. He had failed her. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I had to see you." Her eyes glistened, though her face remained stone. "You don't get to decide that anymore. You don't get to walk back in as if nothing broke." The sting of her words cut deep. Yet beneath them, Adrian felt the faintest trace of something else. Hurt, yes, but also proof that she once loved him enough to wound him this much. The garden around them buzzed with summer insects, but the air between them was heavy. Selina shifted her bag, her voice firm, her gaze unwavering. "You can't just appear here, Adrian," she said. "You can't show up with regret in your eyes and expect everything to return. That's not how it works." Her words landed like stones. Adrian lowered his head, the weight pressing against his chest. He had built towers that scraped the sky, but he could not lift this moment. "I know," he answered softly. "I know I don't deserve to stand here. I just—" His voice broke. "I couldn't stay away." Selina shook her head, her hand brushing her belly as if shielding the life inside. "This isn't your world anymore. You left it behind when you left me behind." Adrian's throat burned. He wanted to argue, to beg, but no plea could undo the truth. The door to the shelter opened behind her. Voices called Selina's name. She turned, giving him one last look. Her eyes were steady, but her lips trembled. Then she walked inside. Adrian remained outside, rooted to the gravel, the echo of her refusal crushing him more than silence ever had. Adrian stood outside the shelter long after Selina had gone in. The voices inside faded, but her words stayed sharp in his ears. She had shut the door on him, yet something inside him refused to walk away. For years, he had let pride decide everything. He built companies, won contracts, and crushed competitors, but pride had destroyed the only thing that mattered. Tonight, for the first time, he chose humility. He looked at the shelter again. It was not just a building. It was her world now. If he wanted to reach her, he had to step into it, not as a billionaire, not as a man with power, but as someone willing to serve. His phone buzzed with messages from his board, but he ignored them. This was no longer about shareholders or deadlines. It was about proving he could change, even if it took every ounce of him. Adrian whispered to himself, almost a vow, "I'll stay. I'll do whatever it takes." The night air was cool against his skin. For the first time, he felt the weight of his decision settle into his bones. He was not leaving Asheville. He was not leaving her again. The next morning, Adrian showed up at the shelter's garden. His suit was gone, replaced with rolled-up sleeves and work boots borrowed from the supply closet. A shovel leaned against his shoulder. The staff stared, whispering to each other. They knew his face from the news. The billionaire was now bending over, pulling weeds from the soil. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His hands, once used only for signing contracts, were caked with dirt. He carried bricks to the back lot, his muscles straining. He hauled lumber, stacked crates, and patched a broken fence. By noon, his shirt was soaked, his palms blistered. Yet, he did not stop. One worker finally muttered, half in disbelief, "He's not joking. He's really doing it." Adrian only nodded and kept moving. Each task was a test. Each nail he hammered was a wordless apology. The billionaire who once ruled boardrooms now bowed to the simplest labor. And, for the first time in years, the sweat running down his face felt like something honest. Selina stood at the second-floor window of the shelter, arms crossed. Below, Adrian shoveled gravel under the blazing sun. His shirt clung to his back, his movements heavy, yet steady. She had seen him in the $1,000 suits commanding attention in crowded rooms, but she had never seen him like this, bent, tired, dirty, silent. A strange tug pulled at her chest. Part of her wanted to believe this was real, that he had changed. But her mind fought back. She remembered nights spent alone in their penthouse waiting for him while he chose work over her. She remembered every unanswered plea, every broken promise. Still, she could not look away. Adrian wiped his brow, leaned on the shovel, and caught his breath. For a second, their eyes almost met through the glass. Selina stepped back quickly, her heart pounding. Her hand pressed against her belly. She whispered to herself, "Don't be fooled. Don't forget." Yet, deep inside, something stirred. A seed of doubt in her anger. A flicker of hope she did not want to admit. Watching him struggle in the sun, Selina felt torn between memory and possibility, between the man who hurt her and the man she hoped he could become. That evening, dark clouds rolled over Asheville. Rain struck hard against the windows, and the wind howled through the old shelter walls. Suddenly, the power snapped off. The rooms sank into silence, broken only by children's frightened cries. Volunteers scrambled for flashlights. Mothers tried to calm their little ones. Fear spread quickly. Adrian moved without hesitation. He gathered candles from the storage room and lit them one by one. The flicker of warm light pushed back the shadows. Slowly, calm returned. But the children were still restless, clinging to their mothers. Adrian spotted a shelf of donated books. He pulled one down. To Kill a Mockingbird. He sat on a chair in the center of the room, his voice steady and deep as he began to read. The words rolled out, smooth and measured. His tone carried warmth, a rhythm that made the children quiet down, eyes wide with attention. The storm raged outside, but inside, his voice created a safe place. Even the adults listened, their shoulders loosening, their breathing slowing. In that moment, Adrian was not a billionaire, not a stranger. He was simply a man bringing comfort, his presence steady in the dark. From the hallway, Selina watched the glow of candles spread across the room. Her eyes followed Adrian as he read, the book resting easily in his hands. His voice filled the space, calm and sure, the same voice that once lulled her to sleep during restless nights. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, but her heart betrayed her. The years seemed to peel away. She remembered him in the early days, reading aloud while she curled beside him, safe and warm. For a few minutes it felt like that man had returned. The children giggled softly at his words. Mothers exchanged grateful looks. Even the storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by the cadence of his reading. Selina pressed her lips together, trying to hold back the rush of emotion. She had built walls around her heart, but now cracks were forming. She told herself it was nothing, just nostalgia, just weakness. Yet she couldn't look away. Every word, every gesture pulled her back to a time when love felt simple. In the dim light, she whispered to herself, "Don't forget who he became." But her heart answered with a tremor, "And don't forget who he was." The storm passed by morning. The garden outside the shelter glistened with rain. Leaves dripped, soil smelled rich and fresh. Adrian worked quietly, repairing a section of the fence that the wind had broken. Selina stepped onto the porch, watching him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Finally, she walked toward him, her steps slow but certain. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice low. "Why stay? Why sweat? Why pretend to belong here?" Adrian set down the hammer and turned to her. His eyes held no arrogance, only weariness and truth. "Because losing you," he said, steady but soft, "was the greatest mistake of my life. Every brick I lay, every nail I drive, it's all to show you I won't make that mistake again." Selina's breath caught. The words landed heavier than she expected. She wanted to dismiss them, to say they meant nothing. But the way he looked at her, tired, humble, desperate, made it hard. Her heart thudded in her chest. She clenched her hands, searching for resolve. Yet a part of her, the part she tried to silence, longed to believe him. Selina stood with her arms folded, her gaze steady on him. The garden smelled of wet earth, the fence half mended between them. She spoke slowly, each word careful, deliberate. "People don't change overnight, Adrian," she said. "You can't show up here, do a little work, and expect me to forget the years I begged for your time." Her words were sharp, but her eyes trembled. Adrian nodded, shoulders heavy. "You're right," he admitted. "I don't deserve forgiveness. Not today, maybe not ever. I'm not asking you to erase the past. I'm only asking for a chance to prove that I can be different." The honesty in his voice surprised her. There was no speech polished for cameras, no promise wrapped in ambition. Just a man stripped down to his regret. Selina lowered her eyes, pressing her hand against her belly. Silence stretched between them. She wanted to push him away, yet something in her heart paused. At last, she turned back toward the shelter. "We'll see," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Adrian picked up the hammer again. The slow rhythm of his work carried into the air, steady, patient, almost like a vow. The days that followed were quiet, almost ordinary. Adrian worked with the other volunteers as if he were one of them. He climbed onto the roof to patch broken shingles. He hauled heavy boxes of donations from the storage shed. He stacked crates of canned food in the pantry until his arms ached. He never complained. He never boasted. He simply showed up each morning, sleeves rolled, hands ready. At first, the staff whispered behind his back. Some thought it was a show. But as the hours turned into days, their whispers shifted. They watched him bend low to carry crates, saw him kneel in the dirt to fix a loose board, and noticed how he never once stepped aside to keep his clothes clean. Respect grew slowly, almost reluctantly. A young volunteer handed him a bottle of water with a smile. An older woman clapped him on the back after he repaired a broken step. Even Selina noticed from the distance. She saw how others began to trust him, how children laughed when he carried them on his shoulders. She would not say it aloud, but in the quiet of her heart she wondered, maybe, just maybe, he meant what he said. On a Saturday morning, the town square filled with booths and music. Adrian wandered through, unsure what he was even looking for. His eyes landed on a table of handmade pottery. Simple mugs, bowls with uneven edges, glazed in earthy tones. One mug caught his eye. It wasn't perfect. A faint crack in the glaze ran down the side, but it was sturdy, beautiful in its flaws. He thought of Selina. That afternoon, he left it on her desk in the shelter office with a note folded inside. "For your tea breaks, from someone trying to learn what really matters." Selina found it hours later. She lifted the mug slowly, running her fingers across the uneven glaze. It was such a small thing, nothing like the grand jewels or handbags he once gave her. Yet it struck deeper. Her chest tightened. Because this was different. It was quiet, thoughtful. It asked for nothing in return. When she saw him later in the hallway, she didn't speak. She only held his eyes for a moment longer than usual. Adrian felt the difference. Small, but real, like a door opening just a crack. A week later, Adrian asked Selina to meet him outside on the porch. The autumn air was crisp, the mountains washed in gold. He held an envelope in his hand, his expression steady but nervous. "I need to give you something," he said. Selina frowned, cautious. She opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a deed. A piece of land on the edge of Asheville, enough space to build another shelter. Her voice shook. "Adrian, what is this?" He drew in a breath. "It's yours. For the women here. For the children. I don't want my name on it. This isn't about me." Selina's eyes filled, confusion and emotion clashing. "Why would you—" "Because money built my empire," he cut in softly. "But it cost me everything that mattered. If I can use it now to give back, maybe I can start making things right." The paper trembled in her hands. This wasn't a grand gesture for show. It was sacrifice. Real and irreversible. For the first time she saw not the billionaire, not the man who once abandoned her. She saw someone learning how to love differently. Selina clutched the deed to her chest and the tears came. Not polite tears, but deep, shaking sobs. Years of loneliness, anger, and quiet strength all spilled out at once. Adrian stood still. Every fiber of him wanted to reach for her, to hold her, but he didn't. Not this time. He only whispered, voice raw, "I'll be here, if you need me." That restraint pierced her even more. He wasn't forcing his way back into her heart. He was waiting, letting her choose. She wiped at her face, ashamed of breaking in front of him. "You don't understand what this does to me," she said hoarsely. "I don't know if I can trust again. I don't know if I can survive being hurt twice." Adrian lowered his eyes. "Then let me prove I won't. Not with words, with time." Silence filled the porch, broken only by the distant sound of children laughing inside. Selina looked down at the land deed again, her tears smudging the ink. She feared him. She missed him. She wanted to believe. For the first time since their marriage ended, her heart whispered a dangerous thought. Maybe people really can change. The air buzzed with soft chatter as townspeople gathered in front of the new building. A banner hung above the porch, painted with steady hands. Evelyn's Haven, named after Selina's grandmother, the woman who once taught her what resilience meant. Selina stood by the ribbon, scissors in her hand, trembling slightly as cameras clicked and children clapped. Her voice wavered as she spoke. "This place is not about me, it's about giving women and children a chance to breathe again." She cut the ribbon, and cheers rose. The doors swung open, revealing rooms painted in warm colors, shelves filled with books, and beds ready for those with nowhere else to go. In the crowd, Adrian stood near the back. He wore no suit, no sign of wealth, only a simple shirt. When the applause rang out, he didn't step forward. He stayed behind, smiling quietly, his heart swelling not from ownership, but from knowing he had helped build something that belonged to her. Selina caught his eye from the porch. For a second, their gazes held. No words, no promises, just a flicker of gratitude, and something deeper, unspoken. Weeks later, the garden behind Evelyn's Haven bloomed with autumn colors. Children played near the fence while Selina stood under a maple tree, her hands folded across her belly. Adrian approached slowly, holding himself back. She turned, and without a word, she placed the small bundle into his arms. Their child, the one he had never dared to hope he'd hold. The baby stirred, soft sounds breaking the silence. Adrian froze. His hands trembled, his breath caught in his chest. He had closed billion-dollar deals, faced rooms full of ruthless investors, yet nothing had ever terrified him more than holding this fragile life. Tears streaked down his face before he could stop them. He whispered, voice breaking, "I don't deserve this, but I will never let go." Selina watched him, her lips trembling. For the first time she saw not the man of glass towers, but a father, stripped of pride, undone by love. Her chest tightened, a spark of hope warming the ache that had lived there for months. The garden was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves. In that stillness, something sacred began to take root. Late one afternoon, the sky turned amber, and the crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves. Adrian sat on the porch steps, the baby asleep inside. Selina walked over, her footsteps light against the wooden boards. For a moment, they didn't speak. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was tender. Selina sat beside him. Her hands rested in her lap, fidgeting, until finally she reached across. Her fingers slid over his, tentative, fragile. "I'm ready," she whispered, her eyes shimmering, ready to try again. Adrian turned to her, stunned. His chest tightened and he couldn't trust his voice. He only nodded, his thumb brushing gently against hers. They sat like that, hands clasped, watching the sun slip behind the mountains. No declarations, no dramatic vows. Just two broken souls daring to rebuild. The world around them seemed to pause. The leaves rustled, the children laughed in the distance, but for that moment, nothing else mattered. They had lost so much, yet here, on this quiet porch in Asheville, they found the courage to begin again. He had once stood above the city, surrounded by glass towers and endless applause, but all the wealth, all the fame, all the power could not protect him from the truth. He had lost what mattered most. Adrian learned that money can build empires, but it cannot mend a broken heart. He learned that success means nothing when it leaves you alone at night. And he learned that love, fragile as it may be, is the only thing strong enough to give life meaning. Beside Selina, holding the child he thought he would never know, he finally understood. Success was never the penthouse or the headlines. It was never the markets bowing to his name. Success was someone who stayed when the rest of the world walked away. Their story was not perfect, and it never would be. Trust takes time. Forgiveness takes courage. But together, they chose to begin again. And in that choice lay the greatest truth of all. The measure of a life is not what you own, but who you love. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope. And stay with us for more journeys that remind us what truly matters.
Hair swept back with calculated nonchalance, jawline tense with concentration. But something was wrong. Julian wasn't smiling. He hadn't all evening, because tonight, his past walked in with a little girl clutching her hand. Julian was midway through discussing expansion plans with a French diplomat when he saw her. Nadia. 2 years had vanished, yet somehow she looked more radiant now. The silver silk dress caught the light as she moved through the crowd. not clinging like desperation, but flowing like quiet strength. She wasn't the nervous event coordinator he'd once transferred across continents without a proper goodbye. She was now a vision of self-possession, holding the hand of a toddler who stopped Julian's breath cold. Same chestnut curls, same olive complexion, but most haunting of all, the same striking hazel eyes with flecks of gold that had once kept him awake at night. "Is she mine?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the benefit's gentle hum. Nadia's gaze cut through him like a blade of ice. "You tell me." "Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Love and Twilights, where every story touches something deep within us. Before we continue this journey together, I want to know, have you ever had someone walk back into your life when you least expected it? Someone who left without explanation? If you felt that earth-shattering moment of reconnection, drop a comment below and subscribe so you don't miss a single moment. 2 years ago, his Barcelona suite, champagne glasses abandoned on the terrace, whispers against warm skin under a Spanish moon. Pleasure neither had expected, but both had craved. A choice that altered everything. And then a transfer letter, a promotion that felt like exile, a door closed. He never saw her again. Until now. The sommelier's voice faded to background noise as Julian moved through the crowd like a man possessed. He navigated between industry titans and hotel investors, barely acknowledging their greetings. His eyes never left Nadia. She stood near a towering floral arrangement, sipping champagne while the little girl studied the room with quiet curiosity. "Nadia." His voice barely functioned when he reached them. She turned with the composed grace of someone who had rehearsed this moment in her mind countless times. "You remember my name." How flattering. Her tone was even, but her eyes, those he remembered with painful clarity, flashed with something complex. His gaze dropped to the child, then back to her. "Is she—" Nadia didn't flinch or blink. "Yours? What do you think, Julian?" The girl peeked from behind her mother's gown, studying him with an intensity that felt familiar. Julian knelt instinctively, softening his presence. "Hello," he said, his voice gentler than he'd known it could be. "What's your name?" "Sophia." Nadia answered for her. "I chose it before I realized she'd have your eyes." Julian's pulse thundered. He'd spent his life mastering rooms, hotel openings, investor meetings, corporate takeovers. But this woman, this child, they rendered him powerless with a single glance. Whispers rippled through nearby guests. "Isn't that Nadia Kazan? Didn't she work for Rivero Hotels? That child. Does she look like Julian?" Nadia turned away calmly. Julian followed. They ended in a quiet corridor near the service entrance. "I didn't know," he started. "You left," she countered. "Left?" Julian shook his head. "You accepted the transfer. I thought—" "Accepted?" Her laugh was soft, bitter. "You moved me halfway across the world with a promotion I never asked for." "I was 28 and pregnant, Julian. What choice did I have? I thought I was protecting your reputation. The board was watching my every move." "No," she cut him off. "You were protecting yourself, and in doing so you abandoned your daughter." The truth hit him harder than any business failure ever had. He remembered sitting in his Barcelona suite the night after they'd been together. Remembered drafting the transfer papers himself. He could have torn them up, could have called her, could have done anything but what he did. A tiny voice broke the tension. "Mama." Sophia had wandered over, her small patent leather shoes clicking against the marble. She looked at Julian, then at her mother. "Is he the ghost?" Nadia knelt beside her, tucking a curl behind the girl's ear. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "He used to be, but not anymore." Sophia's eyes held something neither expected, curiosity. Julian watched them walk away, Nadia's back straight, Sophia skipping lightly beside her. 2 figures in silver and white moving through a sea of dark suits. And Julian, he stood frozen, because for the first time in his life he had everything to say and no right to say it. Julian returned to the ballroom, but his mind was miles away. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, string quartets played, but all he could see were those hazel eyes. Sophia's eyes, his daughter, and Nadia's gaze, not burning with hatred, but heavy with the weight of being forgotten. He wandered onto the terrace, trying to steady his breath, when his assistant approached. "Sir, the International Hotel Association president is requesting your presence for photos. Tell him I'm unavailable." Julian had negotiated billion-dollar hotel acquisitions, faced off against Royal. investors. But tonight, one child holding one woman's hand had reduced him to ash. Outside the ballroom, Nadia sat by a fountain, Sophia curled in her lap with a macaroon someone had given her. Nadia stroked her daughter's hair, expression distant. She hadn't come to create drama. She hadn't come for sympathy. She came for the only thing Julian Rivero had ever refused to give her, acknowledgement. "Do you want to go home, sweetheart?" She whispered. "Is the ghost still here?" Sophia asked. Nadia smiled faintly. "He's not a ghost anymore, baby. He's just confused." Hours later, Julian stood at the window of his Paris hotel suite, overlooking the illuminated Eiffel Tower. His bow tie hung loose around his neck. He drained his cognac without tasting it. "Sophia," he murmured to himself. The name didn't feel foreign on his tongue. He remembered how Nadia used to hum when she organized event details, the small smiles when he complimented her work. She had always been more than he allowed himself to see. And now she had given him a daughter. He didn't wait until morning. At 1:14 a.m., still in his tuxedo pants and shirt sleeves, he took the elevator to the lobby and had his driver take him to Nadia's hotel, an address his assistant had procured within minutes. He sat in the car across the street. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3. But he never approached her door because deep down he knew he wasn't ready to face who he had been. 2 years ago, Nadia stood in the Barcelona hotel's HR office, holding transfer papers. Inside, a substantial salary increase and a relocation package to Singapore. She didn't cry, not in front of anyone. But when she returned to her apartment, she locked herself in the bathroom, clutched the pregnancy test with its 2 pink lines and sank to the floor. She had whispered only one thing: "I won't need him." And then she had gone to work building a life for Sophia. One night shift, one promotion, one tiny apartment at a time. The following afternoon, Julian found her again. This time at Luxembourg Gardens, where she was watching Sophia feed ducks by the pond. Julian observed from a distance, her ponytail catching sunlight, her laugh genuine. She didn't look like a woman waiting for anything. When she finally noticed him, she didn't stop what she was doing. "If you're here to make a speech," she said without turning, "save it. I'm here because I need to speak with you." With her, she turned then, arms crossed. "You transferred me like I was a problematic asset, Julian. Why do you think you deserve access now?" He stepped closer. "I don't think I deserve anything. I'm here. That's all I can be today." Sophia ran over, breadcrumbs on her tiny hands. "Hi again," she said shyly. Julian knelt. "Hi again," he replied, voice softer now. Sophia held out her drawing, a wobbly stick figure of a man, woman, and child. She pointed to each. "That's Mama. That's me. That's you." Julian didn't know whether to smile or weep. He looked up at Nadia. "She thinks I'm the ghost, doesn't she?" Nadia sighed. "She used to. Not anymore. And you?" She hesitated. "I don't need a ghost. I need a man who doesn't disappear again." He looked different now. Still powerful, still composed, but not untouchable. He looked regretful. And maybe that was a beginning. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to decide whether to trust someone who broke your heart once before? It's that impossible choice between protecting yourself and giving love another chance. If you're wrestling with trust after heartbreak, drop Healing Journey in the comments. Your story matters here, and this community understands. She remembered the way he'd held her that night in Barcelona, like she was the only warmth in his carefully constructed world. She had clung to that memory, then hated herself for it. Nadia picked up Sophia and turned to leave. "You want a conversation? Fine, tomorrow. But not in hotel lobbies, not near industry people. You come to me on my terms." Julian nodded instantly. "Name the place." "You already know where I'm staying," she said over her shoulder. Sophia waved at him as they walked away. Julian watched them disappear down the garden path. This time, he wouldn't stay outside. Barcelona, Hotel Rivero, 2 years earlier. The evening air wrapped the coastal city in sultry warmth. Inside the towering glass hotel overlooking the Mediterranean, Julian Rivero returned to solitude again. A half-eaten meal waited on his private terrace. Music played softly through hidden speakers. The only disruption was the sound of someone adjusting floral arrangements in the adjacent room. Nadia moved through the suite with precision. As the hotel's event coordinator, she had stayed late finalizing details for tomorrow's celebrity wedding. The client was demanding, the stakes high. But Nadia understood the rules. Be thorough. Be invisible. Be indispensable. Julian noticed her, even when he pretended not to. She arranged flowers with artistic care. She positioned lighting to flatter every angle. She carried herself with quiet confidence that intrigued him. One evening he walked in and saw her holding a framed photo of a child, his niece, that sat on his desk. "Do you have children?" he asked, surprising himself. She straightened. "No, sir. You look like you knew her. I just like children. They see the world honestly." Julian didn't respond, but he remembered the moment. That night, as he sat alone on his terrace with a glass of Spanish red, the image of Nadia staring at the photo kept repeating in his mind. Days later, he overheard her on the phone, discussing a financial problem. When she realized he might have heard, she quickly ended the call. Julian didn't mention it, but the next day he personally approved her performance bonus months ahead of schedule. She never referenced it, but from then on, she organized his events with even greater attention to detail. Julian watched her from doorways, from behind glass walls, from shadows, and the more he watched, the harder it became to maintain distance. 3 days before the high-profile wedding, Julian returned from a contentious board meeting. His mood was dark, his patience thin. He turned the corner and nearly collided with her. Nadia had been reviewing lighting placement. They both froze. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rivero," she said, stepping back. "Don't call me that." His voice cut through the air. She paused, eyes widening slightly. "What should I call you?" "Julian. Just Julian." She nodded once. "Julian." Just his name on her lips changed something in the air between them. "You coordinate these events like they're your own," he observed. "Sometimes other people's joy becomes your purpose," she replied quietly. That answer lodged in his chest like a splinter. She didn't flirt or soften her voice. She stood there surrounded by sample centerpieces and dignity, and Julian realized she possessed something he lacked: authenticity. He had power, wealth, global influence, but she had sincerity in the face of pressure. And suddenly, all the noise of his empire felt hollow compared to her quiet dedication. After that, Julian created reasons to oversee wedding preparations personally. He asked questions beyond professional necessity. "How long have you worked in events? What's your favorite city? If you could design your perfect day, what would it include?" She never questioned his interest. She simply answered, always thoughtfully, always honestly. He noticed the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way she smiled when guests complimented her work. He noticed everything. One night he stood in the doorway watching her adjust lighting levels, humming softly to herself. He could have left, but he stayed, watched, listened, because something about her presence made his hotel feel less like a property and more like a home. And that terrified him because if he acknowledged it, if he crossed that line, he could never return. The night of the wedding, Julian wasn't supposed to be at the hotel. The executive team had scheduled meetings in Madrid, but after hours of corporate discussions that led nowhere, he flew back to Barcelona. The celebration was winding down. Most guests had departed, leaving only cleaning staff and a few stragglers. The lights were dimmed, candles still flickering throughout the ballroom. Julian found Nadia in the hotel's show kitchen, her black dress slightly wrinkled from a long day's work. A glass of champagne sat beside her as she reviewed the event checklist. She turned and jumped when she saw him, dropping her pen and knocking over the champagne. The glass shattered. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, kneeling quickly. "I'll clean it." "Leave it." Julian's voice came out low, not angry, just focused. She froze, looking up at him from the floor. Nadia. Just her name. It stopped her movements. For a moment, all they heard was distant music and the hum of kitchen equipment. Julian stepped closer. She didn't move. Her knees were still on the floor, but her spine was straight, defiant. "You're not working tonight," he said softly. "The wedding's over. I wanted to finish the report." "Why?" She hesitated. "Perfection doesn't allow loose ends." That answer hit harder than expected. Julian looked down at the spilled champagne. "Stand up," he said. She rose slowly. They were inches apart now. He reached to brush a strand of hair from her face. His thumb lingered on her cheekbone. She didn't pull away. "Why do you let me see you like this?" he asked. "Because you don't pretend I'm invisible," she replied. That shattered something inside him. He touched her waist. Still, she didn't flinch. His breath trembled. "I shouldn't." "Then don't." But neither moved, so he kissed her. It was deep, hungry, not gentle. Julian's hand slid up her back, gripping her like he feared she'd vanish. Nadia's fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer. Their mouths devoured silence. Months of watching, wondering, wanting, released in a single breathless collision. She moaned against his neck. He nearly lost control. They didn't make it to his suite. He lifted her onto the marble kitchen island. Her black dress rode up as he stepped between her thighs, his hands gripping the backs of her legs. She tilted her head back as he kissed down her throat. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, forehead resting against hers. "No," was all she said. He pushed her underwear aside, and she gasped as he slid 2 fingers inside her. Slow, deliberate, curving, gentle. "Julian," she breathed, biting her lip. He unfastened his pants. He entered her with one fluid motion. She cried out, arms tightening around his shoulders. His fingers dug into her hips as her heels pressed against his back. "You feel—" He groaned against her ear, like punishment and salvation at once. "Then take all of me," she whispered. And he did. They lost themselves completely, moaning into each other's mouths, breaking through boundaries they had no business crossing. Afterward, he held her, not out of obligation, but instinct. Nadia's head rested against his chest, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "This doesn't change anything, does it?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "It should." She sat up, reaching for her dress. "But it won't. Nadia, don't make promises you can't keep." Her voice wasn't angry, just resigned. She slipped from the counter, picked up her shoes, and walked barefoot across the marble floor. Julian remained motionless, shirt open, pants undone, a powerful man reduced to nothing by the only woman who'd ever seen him as just a man. The kitchen door swung shut, and all that remained was silence. Morning light streamed through the hotel's vast windows. Nadia stood in the office, fully composed, professional attire perfectly pressed. Her hands trembled slightly as she reviewed event feedback forms. She could still feel him. His hands, his mouth, his body against hers. Yet now, in daylight, it all seemed distant. The door opened behind her. She didn't turn. Julian wore his power uniform, tailored suit, Italian leather shoes. No trace of the man who had whispered her name against her skin hours earlier. "Nadia." She straightened, but didn't face him. "I've approved your transfer to our Singapore property, effective immediately." She turned slowly. "Why?" "It's a significant promotion. Director of Guest Experiences for all Asian properties." The biggest lie he'd ever told. "Of course," she replied, nodding once. Nothing last night was personal. Julian didn't speak. Couldn't. He placed a cream-colored folder on the desk. Inside, transfer papers, a significant salary increase, a relocation package, a non-disclosure agreement. No note, no explanation. "This will cover everything," he said. "And there's a letter of recommendation for your file." She stared at the folder like it was a coffin. "You're transferring me because I let you inside me." "No," Julian replied too quickly. "This is an opportunity." "Is it?" she asked, voice steady. "Then why does it feel like exile?" Silence again. And in that silence, Julian turned away, cowardice wearing Italian leather. She picked up the folder, picked up her dignity, and walked out the same door she had entered countless times before. Only now she wasn't the coordinator. She was a woman who had given herself to someone who couldn't even meet her gaze in daylight. She didn't cry in the elevator. Not yet. Back in her apartment, small but with a view of the sea, Nadia stood, barefoot in the bathroom, fingers gripping the edge of the sink. 2 lines. Pregnant. She didn't scream or break. She simply slid down to the cool tile floor, folder beside her, test clutched in one hand. "Of course it would be now," she whispered. No man, no stability, no plan. But she had a choice, and she chose life. I want to pause here and speak directly to your heart. Have you ever made a choice that terrified you but you knew was right? A moment when you stood alone and chose courage even when no one was there to witness it? That's what true strength looks like. If you've had your moment of quiet bravery, type "I chose courage" in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Back in his suite, Julian poured himself a drink at noon. He stared at the flowers she had arranged days ago, still perfect, still alive. He should have stopped her, should have said anything, but instead, He poured more whiskey because powerful men didn't get emotional. They didn't beg. They didn't say, "I'm sorry I made you feel disposable." So instead, he said nothing and lived with it. The next week, Julian moved through boardrooms like nothing had happened. His assistant noticed he didn't smile. His driver noticed he stayed silent during drives. His executive team noticed his sharpened tone in meetings. But no one asked because men like him weren't questioned. And he told himself he preferred it that way. One night, slightly drunk, Julian pulled up Nadia's personnel file. Her new Singapore address glowed on the screen. His fingers hovered over his phone. He drafted 3 messages but deleted them all. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound like regret disguised as concern? Nadia, wide awake at 3 a.m., hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. Julian, staring at the ceiling of his penthouse suite at the same moment. Same stars, different hemispheres, parallel insomnia. 2 months into her pregnancy, the morning sickness hit. Nadia still arrived early for work, still coordinated flawless events, still smiled when hotel guests complimented the arrangements. She found strength in routine and excellence, in proving to herself that she could stand alone. "You're glowing lately," her assistant remarked one morning. Nadia touched her cheek, wondering if her secret was becoming visible. "New skincare regimen," she lied. At night, she wrote letters to her unborn child, not on paper that could be found, but in her mind as she lay in bed. "You were made on a night that broke me open," she thought. "But you will be the reason I rebuild stronger." 3 months in, Julian was scheduled for a Singapore property visit. He canceled twice, citing scheduling conflicts. The board was confused, but didn't question him. The truth was, he couldn't face the possibility of seeing her. The decision haunted him, not just sending her away, but his cowardice afterward. He should have called, should have checked, should have done anything but pretend she'd never existed. 4 months into her pregnancy, Nadia felt the first flutter of movement. She was reviewing event proposals at her desk when it happened, a gentle ripple, like a fish swimming beneath the surface of a still pond. Her hand flew to her belly, eyes widening. "Hello," she whispered. "I feel you." That night, she bought her first baby item, a tiny pair of yellow socks. Not pink, not blue, just soft, sunny yellow. 5 months pregnant, and Nadia could no longer hide her condition. Her body curved gently but unmistakably beneath her carefully selected wardrobe. She requested a meeting with her director. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. No emotion, just fact. "I see." The director looked uncomfortable. "And the father?" "Not in the picture." 3 words to summarize a novel of pain. "The company has excellent maternity benefits," he assured her. "Take whatever time you need." She nodded, grateful for the lack of judgment. Singapore would be where her child took their first breath. A place Julian had sent her to forget her, but where she would instead create something unforgettable. At 6 months, Julian finally gathered the courage to call Singapore. Not her directly, he still couldn't manage that level of bravery, but her department. "I'm looking for Nadia Kazan," he told the receptionist. "Miss Kazan is on maternity leave," came the unexpected reply. Julian's world stopped. "Maternity leave?" "Yes, sir. She's expecting." "Due next month?" He hung up without another word. The timeline crashed through his mind like a wrecking ball. If she was due next month, that meant Barcelona, the kitchen. That night, he walked to his terrace and stared out at the Mediterranean. The same sea they had watched together, the same stars under which they had connected. And now, thousands of miles away, she carried his child. He drafted an email, deleted it, wrote another, deleted it too. What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound like too little, too late? In the end, he did nothing. Again. The cowardice of powerful men isn't in what they do, but in what they fail to do when it matters most. 7 months pregnant, and Nadia waddled more than walked. Her colleagues threw her a modest baby shower. She accepted gifts with grace, smiled for photos, played the games. No one knew the father was one of the most powerful hoteliers in the world. No one knew the night she spent awake, rehearsing what she would tell her child someday about where they came from. "Your father was like a storm," she practiced saying. Beautiful from a distance, destructive up close. But without the storm, there would be no rainbow. "And you, little one, are my rainbow." 8 months pregnant, and Julian dreamed of her. Not passionate dreams, but ordinary ones. Nadia, In a kitchen, heavy with child, humming as she stirred something on the stove. Nadia reading to a faceless infant. Nadia laughing as tiny hands reached for her face. He woke from these dreams not aroused but hollow, like something vital had been scooped from his chest. 9 months, and Nadia went into labor during a thunderstorm. The kind of dramatic backdrop that seemed fitting for the culmination of such a complicated journey. 16 hours of pain, of pushing, of praying, and then, "It's a girl," the doctor announced. A girl with a full head of dark hair, and when she finally opened them, eyes that reminded Nadia instantly of Julian. Not just the color but the intensity, as if this tiny creature was already appraising the world and finding it wanting. "Sophia," Nadia whispered, holding her daughter for the first time. Sophia Rose Kazan. On the birth certificate, in the space for father's name, she hesitated only briefly before writing, Julian Rivero. Not for him, for Sophia. Because someday, she would ask, and Nadia refused to build their relationship on a lie. Julian never called, never sent flowers, never acknowledged what he didn't know existed, and Nadia stopped waiting for a ghost to materialize. Days became weeks, became months. Sophia grew from a wrinkled newborn, to a determined infant, to a curious toddler. She had Julian's eyes, Julian's focused stare, even Julian's slight frown when concentrating. But she had Nadia's resilience, Nadia's laugh, Nadia's ability to find joy in small things. By the time Sophia was 18 months old, Nadia had been promoted twice more, Director of Operations for Southeast Asia. The irony wasn't lost on her. Julian's attempt to exile her had instead launched a career that might someday rival his own. Then came the invitation, the International Hospitality Excellence Awards in Paris. As a regional director, Nadia was expected to attend. Julian would be there too. He was receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award. The thought of seeing him again after so long made her stomach twist. "Mama, up!" Sophia demanded from her play area, arms raised imperiously. Nadia lifted her daughter, studied those hazel eyes that haunted her dreams. "What do you think, little one? Should we go to Paris and meet your father?" Sophia patted her mother's cheeks with sticky hands. Paris, yes. It wasn't a conscious decision to create a dramatic reunion. Nadia simply refused to hide her daughter any longer. If Julian Rivero happened to be in the same room when the truth walked, in wearing a tiny silver dress to match her mother's, so be it. The night of the gala arrived with painful clarity. Nadia dressed with unusual care. The silver silk dress wasn't chosen to seduce but to armor herself. Sophia twirled in her matching outfit, delighted by the way the fabric caught the light. "You look beautiful, my love," Nadia said, kneeling to adjust her daughter's headband. "You too, Mama." Sophia planted a kiss on her mother's nose. "Pretty Mama." They took a taxi to the venue, Sophia chattering about the lights of Paris streaming past their window. Nadia barely heard her, her heartbeat drowning out all other sounds. The grand ballroom gleamed with old-world opulence. Crystal chandeliers, gold leaf detailing, marble floors so polished they reflected every movement like water. Nadia recognized at least a dozen industry titans within minutes of entering. And then, Julian, standing near the stage, midnight blue suit, impeccably tailored, hair perfectly, styled, face composed in what she recognized as his public mask. He hadn't seen her yet. "Mama, who's that man?" Sophia asked, pointing directly at Julian. The universe had a wicked sense of humor. "Someone I used to know," Nadia replied softly. They moved deeper into the room, accepting champagne from a passing waiter. Nadia positioned them near a massive floral arrangement, partially hidden but with a clear view of the stage. She watched Julian work the room, shaking hands, smiling his professional smile that never quite reached his eyes. And then it happened. His gaze, sweeping the room, landed on her. The recognition was instantaneous. His body went rigid, his conversation halted mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to Sophia, widened almost imperceptibly, then returned to Nadia's face. Time stretched like taffy between them. 2 years of silence compressed into a single electric moment. Nadia didn't wave, didn't smile, simply held his gaze steadily, one hand protectively on Sophia's shoulder. Julian excused himself from his conversation and began moving toward them, navigating the crowd with single-minded focus. Nadia felt Sophia press against her leg, suddenly shy. "It's okay," she murmured to her daughter. "Stay with me." And then he was there, standing before them, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same one he'd worn in Barcelona. Some things never changed. Nadia Just her name, spoken like a prayer or a confession. Julian. Cool, composed, as if they'd parted ways last week rather than 2 years ago. His gaze dropped to Sophia again, lingered on those unmistakable eyes. Is she yours? Nadia finished for him. What do you think? The conversation you just witnessed, this moment of reckoning between two people who once shared everything, and then nothing, is a reminder that our choices follow us even when we think we've outrun them. If you've ever had to face the consequences of a choice you made long ago, type accountability in the comments. Now, let's continue their story and see if some wounds can truly heal. Julian knelt down, bringing himself to Sophia's eye level. Hello there. Sophia studied him curiously before whispering to her mother, Is he the ghost? Nadia felt the question like a physical blow. She had never directly told Sophia about Julian, but occasionally, on nights when her daughter asked about her father, Nadia had mentioned a ghost from the past. Children absorbed everything, even metaphors. Yes, baby, she whispered, stroking Sophia's hair. He used to be. But not anymore. The three of them moved to a quieter area, away from curious eyes and whispers. Julian walked stiffly, like a man being led to judgment. Nadia kept her chin high, her hand firmly holding Sophia's. I didn't know, he said, once they were alone. You never asked, she replied. You never called. You sent me away and forgot I existed. I never forgot you. Selective amnesia, then. You remembered enough to avoid me, but not enough to check if I was okay. Sophia tugged at her mother's dress. Mama, I'm thirsty. Julian instantly reached for a passing waiter, securing a small glass of juice. He offered it to Sophia, who accepted it cautiously. Thank you, she said, the politeness Nadia had instilled in her overcoming her shyness. You're very welcome, Julian replied, his voice gentler than Nadia had ever heard it. The small exchange felt monumental, the first interaction between father and daughter, mundane but miraculous. How old is she? Julian asked, though Nadia suspected he had already calculated the math. 2 years and 3 months. She has your smile. She has your eyes, your focus too. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken accusations and explanations. Why are you here, Nadia? He finally asked. You could have contacted me privately. Why would I do that? To make this easier for you? She shook her head. I'm here because I was invited, because I earned my place at this event. Sophia is with me because she's my daughter, and I don't hide her existence. Our daughter, he corrected quietly. Biologically, yes. In every way that matters, no. You haven't earned that title. Julian didn't argue. Couldn't. The truth of her words was undeniable. I want to know her, he said simply. You had 2 years. I didn't know she existed. Would it have mattered if you did? The question hung between them, dangerous and sharp. Julian didn't answer immediately, and his hesitation told Nadia everything. That's what I thought, she said softly. Sophia, bored with adult conversation, began exploring the small alcove, touching the velvet curtains with curious fingers. I'm different now, Julian said, watching his daughter. Congratulations. Growth is admirable, but it doesn't erase consequences. I'm not asking for erasure. I'm asking for a chance. Nadia studied him, looking for signs of the man who had casually exiled her when she became inconvenient. He looked the same, handsome, powerful, composed. But something in his eyes had changed. There was a vulnerability there she'd never seen before. A chance to what? Play weekend father when it's convenient? Add family man to your corporate biography? A chance to be in her life, in whatever capacity you deem appropriate. Sophia wandered back to her mother, wrapping her arms around Nadia's leg. Mama, I'm sleepy. Julian checked his watch. It's late for her. Yes, well, parenthood doesn't follow a convenient schedule. He nodded, accepting the barb without defense. Let me call you a car. I can manage. I know you can. You've managed everything, brilliantly. But please, let me do this one small thing. Nadia hesitated, then nodded curtly. Fine. Julian made a quick call, then escorted them to the front entrance. As they waited, he knelt again to Sophia's level. It was very nice to meet you, Sophia. The little girl yawned, then surprised both adults by asking, Will I see you again? Julian looked up at Nadia, the question in his eyes. That's up to your mother, he told Sophia. If she wants it, Nadia added, then perhaps. The car arrived. Julian held the door as Nadia helped Sophia inside. Before she could follow, he touched her arm lightly. Please, just one conversation. On your terms, your timing. Nadia looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that night. Beyond the expensive suit and practiced composure, she saw a man terrified of losing something he'd only just discovered he wanted. Tomorrow, the Luxembourg Gardens at noon, where you saw us today. Relief washed over his features. I'll be there. Don't be late. And don't bring anything. No gifts, no grand gestures. Just you. Just me, he agreed. She slid into the car beside Sophia, who was already drifting to sleep. As the vehicle pulled away, Nadia watched Julian through the rear window. He stood perfectly still, watching them until they disappeared from view. Back in her hotel room, Nadia tucked Sophia into bed, then sat on the balcony with a glass of wine. The Paris skyline twinkled before her, but she saw only memories. Julian's hands on her skin, Julian's voice in her ear, Julian's absence in her daughter's life. Could she trust him? Should she? Tomorrow would tell. The Luxembourg Gardens bloomed with summer glory. Sophia chased butterflies while Nadia sat on a bench, watching both her daughter and the park entrance. Exactly at noon, Julian appeared. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a simple button-down shirt. No suit armor today. He spotted them immediately but approached slowly, as if giving Nadia time to change her mind. You came, he said, stopping a respectful distance away. I said I would. May I? He gestured to the bench. She nodded, and he sat beside her, leaving space between them. She's beautiful, he said, watching Sophia. Yes, she is. Does she know? About me, I mean. She knows her father exists, but isn't part of our lives. I haven't lied to her, but I've kept explanations age-appropriate. Julian nodded. Thank you for that. For not poisoning her against me. That would only hurt her in the long run. Silence stretched between them, not entirely uncomfortable. I rehearsed what to say, he admitted. Had an entire speech prepared. And now I just want to listen. Tell me about her. Tell me about you. I've missed everything. Nadia considered refusing, making him work harder for information he should have been present to witness. But there was something disarming about his humility. She was born during a thunderstorm, she began. 16 hours of labor. She didn't cry right away, just looked around the room like she was assessing it. Julian smiled slightly, like a hotel inspection. Exactly. She started walking at 10 months, climbed out of her crib at 14 months. She loves books about animals and hates carrots with surprising passion. And you? How have you been? Managing. Building a career while raising a child alone isn't easy, but I've never regretted my choice. You're remarkable, he said simply. Don't do that. What? Don't admire me for surviving what you helped create. He flinched but nodded. You're right. I'm sorry. Sophia noticed Julian then and came running over, slightly out of breath. You came back. I did, he replied, clearly surprised by her recognition. I hope that's okay. She nodded seriously. Mama said you might. Your mama is very smart. The smartest, Sophia agreed solemnly. Julian laughed, a genuine sound that Nadia realized she'd rarely heard during their time together in Barcelona. Would you like to feed the ducks with me? Sophia asked, her natural childish openness winning out over shyness. Julian looked at Nadia, silently asking permission. Stay where I can see you, she told them both. Julian walked with Sophia to the pond's edge, keeping a respectful distance while still engaging with her. Nadia watched them, Julian carefully showing Sophia how to throw bread without. Scaring the ducks, Sophia giggling when the birds quacked appreciatively. It was an ordinary scene, a man and a child feeding ducks on a summer day. But for Nadia, it was surreal. The two people who shared her heart but had never shared space were suddenly together, connected by genetics and little else. When they returned, Sophia was chattering happily about the greedy duck who had taken more than his share. Julian listened with complete attention, as if a toddler's duck observations were as important as any board meeting. Mama, can Julian come for ice cream too? Sophia asked. Nadia hesitated. Not today, sweetheart. Maybe another time. Julian accepted this without protest. I'd like that. Another time. Sophia ran off to chase more butterflies, leaving the adults alone again. Thank you, Julian said quietly. For this, I haven't decided anything yet, Nadia warned. This isn't permission. I understand. Do you? Because I need to be absolutely clear. If you want to be in her life, in any capacity, it must be consistent. You don't get to drop in when it's convenient and disappear when it's not. She deserves better than that. I agree completely. And you need to understand that I make the decisions about her welfare. That won't change. He nodded. I wouldn't expect it to. What exactly are you hoping for here, Julian? What's your endgame? He considered her question carefully. Honestly, I don't know. 24 hours ago, I didn't know I had a daughter. I'm still processing that reality, but I know I want to be part of her life, however you'll allow it. And us? What about us? The question surprised them both. Nadia hadn't meant to ask it, but there it was, hanging between them. That's entirely up to you, he said carefully. I lost any right to expectations when I sent you away. Good answer, she admitted. Sophia returned, flower petals clinging to her curls. Mama, I'm hungry. Then we should go find lunch, Nadia said, rising from the bench. Julian stood too, maintaining careful distance. When can I see her again? Nadia studied him, the hopeful uncertainty in his eyes, the way he watched Sophia with wonder and regret mingled together. Give me your number, she said finally. I'll text you. He recited it, and she entered it into her phone. Goodbye, Julian. Goodbye, Nadia. He knelt to Sophia's level. Goodbye, Sophia. Thank you for showing me the ducks. Bye-bye. Sophia waved enthusiastically. See you tomorrow. Not tomorrow, baby, Nadia corrected gently. But maybe soon. They walked away, Sophia skipping beside her mother. Nadia felt Julian's gaze following them but didn't look back. That evening, as Sophia slept, Nadia paced her hotel room. The ball was in her court now. Julian had made his interest clear but had, surprisingly, placed no pressure on her. He was letting her dictate the terms. It was more respect than he'd shown 2 years ago. After an hour of internal debate, she sent a text. Hotel lobby, 9 a.m. tomorrow, just you and me. We need to talk details if this is going to work. His reply came instantly. I'll be there. When Nadia stepped off the elevator the next morning, Julian was already waiting, sitting quietly in a corner of the lobby. No coffee, no newspaper, no phone, just waiting. You're early, she observed, taking the seat across from him. I didn't want to risk being late. A waiter approached. They both ordered coffee. Where's Sophia? Julian asked. With the hotel's childcare service. I thought we needed to talk privately. He nodded. Thank you for meeting me. Let's establish some ground rules, Nadia said, bypassing pleasantries. If you want to be in Sophia's life, I need certain commitments from you. Anything. Don't say that until you've heard the terms. First, consistency. You don't get to appear and disappear. Once you're in her life, you're in it for good. Agreed. Second, you follow my lead with her. I've been her only parent for 2 years. I know her routines, her needs, her sensitivities. Of course. Third, no buying her affection. No extravagant gifts, no grand experiences designed to make you the fun parent while I'm the one enforcing rules and boundaries. Julian nodded. That's fair. Fourth, and this is non-negotiable, you don't get to make unilateral decisions about her. Not about schooling, not about healthcare, not about anything. We discuss, I decide. He hesitated slightly at this one, but ultimately nodded. I understand. Fifth, our history, yours and mine, stays separate from our co-parenting relationship. Whatever happened between us doesn't affect how we raise her. Agreed, though that might be the most challenging one. Their coffee arrived. Nadia sipped hers, studying him over the rim of the cup. You're being very accommodating, she observed. That's not like you. I'm not the same man I was in Barcelona. What changed? Seeing you walk into that gala with my daughter. Realizing what I'd thrown away without even knowing its value. She nodded slowly. So what happens now, practically speaking? You live in Barcelona. We live in Singapore. I travel constantly. I can arrange to be in Singapore regularly. And when you're not, what then? Video calls, letters, whatever works for her age. And when the novelty wears off, when the reality of parenthood, the tantrums, the illnesses, the mundane responsibilities sets in. Julian leaned forward. Nadia, I'm not naive enough to think this will be easy, but I am committed enough to try anyway. I've missed 2 years of her life. I don't want to miss any more. The sincerity in his voice gave her pause. Perhaps he had changed. Or perhaps he was simply very good at appearing sincere when it served his purposes. We're returning to Singapore tomorrow, she said. I have a job. Sophia has a routine. I understand. I can arrange for you to see her once more before we leave. A proper introduction, not just a chance meeting. Relief flooded his features. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is a trial run, Julian. One misstep, one broken promise, and it ends. I won't let either of you down again. Nadia stood, gathering her bag. Dinner, tonight. Our hotel suite, 6 o'clock. Bring nothing but yourself. He nodded, standing as well. 6 o'clock. As she turned to leave, he called after her. Nadia? She paused, looking back. Thank you for raising her so beautifully, for putting her name on the birth certificate, for not erasing me completely. I didn't do it for you, she said quietly. I did it for her. She deserves to know where she comes from, even if half of her story was missing. With that, she walked away, leaving Julian standing alone in the lobby, watching her. Retreat for the second time in his life, but this time with the promise of return. We all reach crossroads where we must decide, do we open the door to someone who once closed it on us? Nadia stands at that threshold now, balancing protection with possibility. If you've ever had to make a similar choice, weighing the risk of hurt against the potential for healing, type second chances in the comments. Your experience might light the way for someone facing their own difficult decision. At exactly 6 o'clock, Julian stood outside Nadia's hotel suite, a strange nervousness overtaking him. He'd negotiated with royalty, closed billion-dollar deals, addressed rooms full of investors without breaking a sweat. Yet his hand trembled slightly as he knocked on the door. Nadia opened it, dressed casually in a simple blouse and trousers. Behind her, he could hear the animated sounds of a children's show playing on the television. You're punctual, she observed, stepping aside to let him in. Always, for important matters. The suite was modest but comfortable. Toys were scattered across the coffee table. A small suitcase lay open with neatly folded children's clothes, evidence of a life he hadn't been part of building. Sophia sat cross-legged on the sofa, completely absorbed in her cartoon. She wore tiny jeans and a shirt with a butterfly print, her dark curls secured with colorful clips. Sophia, Nadia called gently. We have a visitor. The little girl looked up, her eyes brightening with recognition. Duck Man. Julian couldn't help but smile at the nickname. Hello again. Nadia turned off the television, earning a brief pout from Sophia that quickly faded when she realized she had an audience. Sophia, this is Julian, Nadia said, choosing her words carefully. He's going to have dinner with us tonight. Why? Sophia asked with a child's blunt curiosity. Nadia and Julian exchanged glances. They hadn't discussed exactly what to tell her. Because, Julian said, kneeling to her level, I'd like to get to know you better. Sophia considered this explanation, head tilted thoughtfully. Okay. Do you like spaghetti? Mama ordered spaghetti. I love spaghetti, Julian assured her. Me too. But no green things. No green things, he agreed solemnly. Nadia watched their interaction with guarded eyes. Dinner will be here soon. Sophia, why don't you show Julian your drawing from today? Excited to have a new audience, Sophia scrambled off the sofa and retrieved a paper from a small backpack. She presented it to Julian with pride. It's the Eiffel Tower, she explained, pointing to a triangular scribble. And that's me, and that's Mama, and that's a bird. Julian studied the drawing with genuine interest. This is excellent. You're very talented. Sophia beamed. I know. Nadia choked back a laugh at her daughter's confidence. Humility is still a work in progress. Why be humble when you're clearly brilliant? Julian winked at Sophia, who giggled. Room service arrived with their dinner. Nadia had ordered simply spaghetti for Sophia, as promised, and grilled fish with vegetables for the adults. They sat at the small dining table, Sophia perched on a chair boosted by cushions. So, Sophia, Julian began carefully, what do you like to do for fun? Swimming and drawing, and I like the playground with the big slide. She twirled spaghetti around her fork with surprising dexterity for a 2-year-old. Do you like swimming? I do. Very much. Mama takes me swimming every Saturday. That sounds wonderful. The conversation flowed with surprising ease. Sophia chattered happily about her favorite things, her friends at daycare, the toy elephant she'd left at home in Singapore. Julian listened attentively, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested. Nadia remained mostly quiet, observing their interaction. Julian was different with Sophia than he'd been with anyone in Barcelona. Gentler, more patient, fully present in a way she'd rarely seen him. After dinner, Sophia's energy began to wane, her animated chatter slowing, her eyes growing heavy. "I think it's someone's bedtime," Nadia said, glancing at her watch. "No, not sleepy," Sophia protested, even as she yawned widely. "Would you like me to read you a story before bed?" Julian offered. Sophia perked up. "Yes, the elephant book." Nadia hesitated, then nodded. One story, then bed. Julian followed them into the bedroom portion of the suite, where a small rollaway bed had been set up for Sophia. Nadia retrieved a well-worn picture book about an elephant searching for his family. As Julian sat on the edge of the bed and began to read, his voice took on a warmth Nadia had never heard before. He did different voices for different characters, asked Sophia questions about the illustrations, made her giggle with silly sound effects. By the time he finished the story, Sophia's eyes were drooping despite her efforts to stay awake. "Good night, Sophia," Julian said softly. "Night-night, Julian," she mumbled. Then, unexpectedly, "Come back tomorrow?" Julian looked at Nadia, uncertain. "We'll see," Nadia answered for him, leaning down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Sleep well, my love." They left Sophia's bedside, returning to the suite's sitting area. Nadia closed the bedroom door part way, leaving it open just enough to hear if Sophia called. "You're good with her," Nadia admitted, pouring herself a glass of water. "She makes it easy. She's extraordinary. She is—" An awkward silence fell between them. The easy flow of conversation that had existed with Sophia as a buffer disappeared in her absence. "Thank you," Julian said finally. "For tonight. For letting me be here." Nadia nodded, sitting on the sofa. "She liked you." Children are surprisingly good judges of character, or surprisingly easy to charm. He acknowledged the barb with a slight nod. "Fair point. What happens now, Julian? Really, beyond platitudes and promises." He sat in the armchair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'd like to visit Singapore next week, spend time with both of you, get to know her routine, her world, and then regular visits, video calls when I can't be there in person. I can adjust my travel schedule to prioritize Singapore. For how long? A month? A year? Until the novelty wears off. For as long as she needs me. For as long as you'll allow it." Nadia studied him, searching for signs of insincerity. "And your board? Your investors? How will they feel about the great Julian Rivero suddenly spending so much time in Singapore? They'll adapt. Or not. It doesn't matter." She raised an eyebrow. "The Julian I knew would never say something like that. The Julian you knew didn't know what he had to lose." The raw honesty in his voice gave her pause. There was something different about him, a vulnerability that hadn't existed before. "We leave tomorrow afternoon," she said finally. "If you want to see her again before we go, come for breakfast. 8 o'clock. I'll be here." He stood to leave, sensing she needed space. At the door, he paused. "Nadia." "Don't," she said quietly. "Whatever you're about to say, apology, explanation, declaration, just don't. Not yet. This isn't about us." "You're right. Good night." After he left, Nadia checked on Sophia, who was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around a plush toy. She brushed a curl from her daughter's forehead, a familiar ache in her chest. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the sleeping child. "Am I making a mistake, letting him into our lives?" Sophia sighed in her sleep, but offered no answers. Think about Nadia's dilemma for a moment. How many of us hold the power to forgive but struggle with the courage to use it? How many of us must choose between protecting our hearts and opening doors that might lead to healing? If you've ever stood where she stands now, caught between caution and hope, type healing as a choice in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Breakfast the next morning was less awkward than Nadia had anticipated. Julian arrived precisely at 8, bringing nothing but himself as instructed. Sophia, excited by the unexpected encore appearance, monopolized the conversation, showing Julian her toys and books with enthusiastic commentary. "And this is Ellie," she said, holding up a well-loved stuffed elephant. "She goes everywhere with me." "Everywhere?" Julian asked. "Everywhere important," Sophia confirmed seriously. They ate in the hotel restaurant, pancakes for Sophia, omelets for the adults. Julian proved adept at cutting Sophia's pancakes into perfect bite-sized pieces, a skill Nadia wouldn't have expected from him. "What time is your flight?" he asked as Sophia focused on drowning her pancakes in syrup. 3:00. May I drive you to the airport? Nadia hesitated. That's not necessary. I know, I'd like to anyway. She considered his offer. All right. After breakfast, they returned to the suite so Nadia could finish packing. Julian sat on the floor with Sophia, building a tower with blocks that the hotel had provided. Higher, Sophia demanded as the tower grew precariously tall. If we go much higher, it might fall, Julian warned. That's okay. We can build it again. Julian glanced up, finding Nadia watching them with an unreadable expression. What? He asked. Nothing, she said, turning back to her packing. She's right, you know. When things fall, you can rebuild them. The significance of her words wasn't lost on him. At noon, they checked out of the hotel. Julian's driver waited with a luxury sedan, complete with a child seat already installed. Nadia raised an eyebrow at this detail. I called ahead, Julian explained. Safety first. The drive to Charles de Gaulle Airport was mostly filled with Sophia's commentary on the passing scenery and Julian's attentive responses. Nadia remained quiet, mentally preparing for their separation and what would come next. At the terminal, Julian accompanied them as far as security would allow. Kneeling before Sophia, he found himself suddenly emotional. I've enjoyed meeting you, Sophia, he said, his voice slightly rough. I hope I can see you again soon. In Singapore? She asked. Yes, in Singapore. She nodded, apparently satisfied with this answer. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck in a quick hug. Bye-bye, Julian. He returned the hug gently, meeting Nadia's eyes over Sophia's shoulder. The moment felt significant, a turning point neither had anticipated. Standing, he faced Nadia. I'll be in Singapore next Wednesday, if that works for you. Text me when your plans are confirmed. We'll arrange something. He nodded. Have a safe flight. As they walked away, Sophia turned to wave repeatedly until they rounded a corner and Julian disappeared from view. On the long flight back to Singapore, while Sophia slept against her shoulder, Nadia stared out the window at the darkness. The past few days felt surreal, Julian stepping back into their lives, Sophia accepting. Him with a child's easy openness, herself navigating emotions she'd thought long buried. Mama, Sophia mumbled sleepily. Yes, baby? Is Julian my friend now? Nadia hesitated. Would you like him to be? Sophia nodded against her shoulder. He's nice, and he does good voices for elephant stories. Yes, he does. Will I see him again? Yes, sweetheart. You'll see him again. Satisfied, Sophia drifted back to sleep, unaware of the complexity behind her simple question. Back in Singapore, they settled into their routine, Nadia working, Sophia at daycare, evenings and weekends together. But there was a new element now, Julian's daily video calls. Brief at first, just a few minutes to say hello, but Sophia looked forward to them with increasing excitement. True to his word, Julian arrived in Singapore the following Wednesday. He called from his hotel after checking in. Is tomorrow evening convenient? Or is that too soon? Tomorrow is fine, Nadia replied. Sophia has been asking about you. She has. The pleasure in his voice was unmistakable. Don't let it go to your head. She also asks about the building superintendent's cat with the same enthusiasm. He laughed. I'll try to be more interesting than a cat. The next evening, Julian arrived at their apartment precisely on time. Nadia's home was modest but warm, 2 bedrooms in a high-rise with a small balcony overlooking the city. Children's artwork decorated the refrigerator. Photos of Sophia lined the walls. It was clearly a home built around love. Sophia greeted him with excitement, immediately dragging him to see. Her room, her toys, her collection of seashells from beach outings. Julian followed willingly, expressing appropriate admiration for each treasure. Dinner was casual, takeout from a local restaurant that Sophia declared was the best noodles ever. Afterward, they took Sophia to a nearby playground, where Julian pushed her on the swings with patience that impressed Nadia. Higher, Sophia demanded, fearless as always. Are you sure? You're already flying. Higher. I want to touch the sky. Julian obliged, pushing just hard enough to thrill but not frighten. Nadia watched from a bench, conflicted emotions swirling. There was something undeniably right about seeing Sophia laughing with her father, yet something unsettling about how easily he had stepped into their carefully constructed life. As the evening wound down and Sophia's energy began to wane, They walked back to the apartment together. Sophia insisted on holding both their hands, swinging between them as they walked. 1, 2, 3, whee! She counted, jumping as they lifted her between them. The simple joy of the moment wasn't lost on either adult. This was what should have been all along, the three of them, together, a family. But 2 years of separation and hurt stood between that possibility and reality. Back at the apartment, Julian read Sophia her bedtime story, now familiar, with her preference for dramatic voices and interactive questions. When she fell asleep, he carefully extracted himself, meeting Nadia in the living room. "Thank you for today," he said, keeping his voice low. She's incredible, Nadia." "Yes, she is." "How long can you stay in Singapore?" she asked after a moment. "I've cleared my schedule for 2 weeks. After that, I'll need to return to Barcelona briefly, but I can come back." 2 weeks, she repeated. "And what do you expect during those 2 weeks?" "Whatever you're comfortable with. Time with Sophia primarily. Getting to know her routine, her preferences, and us." "What about us, Julian?" The question hung between them, heavier than before. "That depends entirely on you," he said carefully. "I won't pretend I don't still feel something for you, Nadia, but I also won't pressure you. What exists between us now is Sophia, and her well-being comes first." It was the right answer, but it still left her unsatisfied somehow. "I should go," he said, sensing her discomfort. "What time would be good tomorrow?" "She has daycare until 4. After that, we usually go to the park if weather permits. May I join you?" "Yes. Meet us at the daycare. I'll text you the address." At the door, he paused. "Nadia, I know words mean little after what happened, but I am sorry. For all of it." She nodded once, not quite ready to verbalize forgiveness. "Good night, Julian." Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Julian would meet them after Sophia's daycare, spend the evening with them, participate in the bedtime routine, then leave. Each day, Sophia grew more attached to him. Each day, Nadia's wariness battled with the undeniable reality that Julian was trying, really trying, to be present. Sometimes I wonder if time really heals all wounds, or if it simply gives us the distance we need to see people clearly. Watching someone consistently show up, day after day, can reveal truths that words alone never could. Have you ever had someone prove their change through actions rather than promises? If so, type actions speak louder in the comments. Now, let's see how Julian's consistent presence begins to reshape what seemed irreparably broken. On the 8th day of Julian's visit, rain poured relentlessly across Singapore. The park was out of the question, so they remained in Nadia's apartment, Sophia growing increasingly restless with confinement. "I'm bored," she announced dramatically, flopping onto the sofa. "We could watch a movie," Nadia suggested, already having cycled through books, coloring, and building blocks. "No movies," Sophia pouted. "Want to do something fun?" Julian, who had been quietly observing, suddenly stood. "I have an idea. Do you have sheets and clothespins?" Nadia looked confused, but nodded. "In the linen closet." "Why?" 30 minutes later, the living room had been transformed into an elaborate fort. Sheets draped from furniture, creating tunnels and chambers. Cushions formed the foundation. String lights from Sophia's bedroom twinkled inside, giving the space a magical quality. Sophia was delighted, crawling through the passages with squeals of joy. "Come see my room, Mama." Nadia lowered herself to her knees, crawling into the fort after her daughter. Inside, Julian had somehow created a cozy space with pillows and blankets. Sophia's stuffed animals were arranged as guests for a tea party. "This is amazing," Nadia admitted, looking at Julian with new appreciation. He shrugged, seeming almost embarrassed. "My nanny used to make these for me when I was little, on rainy days when I couldn't go outside." The admission, this small glimpse into his childhood, caught Nadia off guard. In all their time together in Barcelona, Julian had rarely spoken about his past. They spent the afternoon in the fort, telling stories, playing games, enjoying the simple pleasure of imagination. When Sophia eventually fell asleep, curled up on pillows with her elephant clutched to her chest, Nadia and Julian carefully extracted themselves, leaving the fort intact. "Thank you," Nadia said quietly as they sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea. She needed that. "So did I, if I'm honest. It was my pleasure. You never told me about your nanny before." Julian stared into his cup. "I don't talk about my childhood much." "Why not?" He was silent for a long moment. "It wasn't particularly happy. My parents were absent Physically present sometimes, emotionally never. I'm sorry. Don't be. It shaped me. Not always in good ways, I realize now. The admission hung between them, revealing vulnerability she'd never seen from him in Barcelona. Is that why you sent me away? She asked suddenly. Because of your parents? He didn't answer immediately, weighing his words. I think I was afraid of feeling too much. For you. For what might come after. Emotional entanglement wasn't part of my life plan. And now? Now I realize the plans are just illusions of control. Real life happens regardless. Nadia nodded slowly. Yes, it does. They fell silent, the only sound the gentle patter of rain against the windows and Sophia's soft breathing from within the fort. Julian, Nadia said finally, I need to know something. Anything. If you had known I was pregnant, would you have still sent me away? It was the question that had haunted her for 2 years. The answer wouldn't change the past, but somehow it mattered anyway. Julian met her gaze directly. I want to say no. I want to believe I would have been better than that. But 2 years ago? I can't honestly promise I would have made the right choice. The honesty hurt, but she appreciated it more than a comforting lie. And now? She pressed. Now I know what I lost, what I almost lost permanently, and I'll spend as long as it takes earning the right to be in her life. In yours, if you'll ever allow it. She nodded, accepting his answer without commenting on the last part. It's getting late. He took the cue, standing to leave. At the door, he paused. Would it be all right if I took her to the aquarium tomorrow? Both of you, I mean. She'd like that. She loves the jellyfish exhibit. Then jellyfish it is. After he left, Nadia returned to the fort, crawling in beside her sleeping daughter. She watched Sophia's peaceful face, wondering if she was doing the right thing letting Julian into their lives. The risk of him disappointing Sophia was real. The risk of him disappointing Nadia, again, felt almost certain. Yet watching him today, creating magic from sheets and string lights delighting in Sophia, his joy, had shown her a side of Julian Rivero she'd never fully seen in Barcelona. Maybe people could change, or maybe they simply revealed parts of themselves that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The aquarium trip was a success. Sophia pressed her face against the glass of the jellyfish tank, mesmerized by their graceful movements. Julian lifted her onto his shoulders for a better view of the shark feeding, her small hands gripping his hair for balance. Not too tight, sweetheart, he winced. Sorry, she giggled, not sounding sorry at all. Nadia captured a photo without thinking, Julian with Sophia on his shoulders, both laughing, backlit by the blue glow of the massive tank. Only after taking it did she realize what she'd done. Created their first family photograph. Days turned into the second week of Julian's stay. His hotel room remained mostly unused as he spent from morning until Sophia's bedtime at their apartment. He brought breakfast some mornings, learned Sophia's favorite foods, became adept at handling her occasional tantrums. One evening, after Sophia was asleep, Nadia found Julian studying the photographs. On her living room wall, a timeline of Sophia's life from newborn to present. I missed so much, he said quietly, not turning around. Yes. This one, he pointed to a photo of Sophia at about 6 months, sitting in a high chair with pureed foods smeared across her face. She looked so serious, even covered in, what is that, squash? Sweet potato. She hated it, but was determined to conquer it anyway. That determination, is that from you or me? Probably both. Neither of us gives up easily. He turned to face her. No, we don't. Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of shared traits now, visible in their daughter, a connection that transcended their complicated past. Nadia, Julian began, stepping closer. I know I have no right to ask this, but when I return to Barcelona next week, would you consider coming with me? Both of you? The request caught her off guard. What? Just for a visit, a week perhaps. I'd like Sophia to see where I live, where she was conceived. The blunt reference to their night together made Nadia flush slightly. Julian, I have a job, responsibilities. I know. But you also have considerable vacation time accrued, according to your assistant. She raised an eyebrow. You checked with my assistant? I wanted to know if it was even possible before asking. Nadia shook her head, not entirely surprised by his thoroughness. That's presumptuous. Hopeful, he corrected. Not presumptuous. She hesitated, weighing the implications. Traveling to Barcelona with Julian would blur the careful boundaries she'd established. It would mean something. To him, to her, potentially to Sophia. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask." The next day, while Sophia was at daycare, Nadia requested a private lunch with Julian. "I need to understand exactly what you're proposing with this Barcelona trip," she said after they'd ordered. "Because it feels like more than just showing Sophia your home." Julian considered his response carefully. "It is more, for me at least. But that doesn't mean you need to see it the same way." "Then how should I see it?" "As an opportunity, for Sophia to know my world, for you to see if there's anything still worth salvaging between us. And if there isn't, then we continue as we are, co-parents who respect each other and put our daughter first." His answer was reasonable, mature even. The Julian she'd known in Barcelona would have been more demanding, less accepting of her hesitation. "I'll come," she decided, "but I'm booking our return tickets beforehand. 1 week, no extensions." Relief washed over his features. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This doesn't mean anything beyond what I've said." "I understand." But something in his eyes suggested he hoped for more, even as he respected her boundaries. The night before Julian's departure back to Barcelona, he stayed late at the apartment, helping Sophia build an elaborate block city on the living room floor. "Will you come back?" Sophia asked as bedtime approached, sensing the significance of the evening. "Yes," Julian promised. "Very soon. And guess what? You and Mama are going to visit my home soon, too." Sophia's eyes widened. "Your home? Does it have a swimming pool?" Julian laughed. "As a matter of fact, it does." "Yay. I'll bring Ellie." After Sophia was asleep, Julian helped Nadia clean up the block city that had taken over most of the living room floor. "Thank you," he said as they worked, "for these 2 weeks, for agreeing to visit Barcelona. I'm doing it for Sophia, I know. Still, thank you." As he prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Nadia, don't," she said, already knowing what might come next. "We're not there yet." He nodded, accepting her boundary. "Good night, then. I'll call when I land." After he left, Nadia stood in her quiet apartment, feeling his absence more acutely than she'd expected. 2 weeks of his constant presence had changed something, shifted the careful equilibrium she'd maintained for 2 years. The question wasn't whether she still had feelings for Julian. Those had never fully disappeared, despite her best efforts. The question was whether she could trust those feelings, trust him, after what had happened before. Have you ever noticed how absence can clarify feelings more powerfully than presence? Sometimes it's only when someone steps away that we recognize what they truly mean to us. If you've ever realized the importance of someone only after they were gone, type "distance teaches" in the comments. Your insight might help someone else recognize what's standing right in front of them. 2 weeks later, Nadia and Sophia boarded a flight to Barcelona. Julian had offered his private jet, but Nadia had refused, preferring the neutrality of commercial travel. Still, he'd arranged first-class tickets, and Sophia was delighted by the special treatment. "Look, Mama, my chair turns into a bed," she exclaimed, as the flight attendant demonstrated the seat features. "Yes, it's very nice," Nadia agreed, shooting Julian a text that they were boarding. His reply came instantly. "Safe travels. Can't wait to see you both." The journey was long but comfortable. Sophia slept for most of it, while Nadia alternated between reading and staring out the window, questioning her decision to make this trip. When they landed in Barcelona, Julian was waiting at arrivals, casual, in jeans and a light sweater rather than his usual business attire. Sophia spotted him first, breaking free from Nadia's grasp to run toward him. "Julian," she called, launching herself into his arms. He caught her, lifting her high. "Hello, princess. Did you have a good flight?" "Yes, I had ice cream and cake." He raised an eyebrow at Nadia, who shrugged. "It's vacation." The drive from the airport to Julian's home took them along the coast, the Mediterranean glittering in the late afternoon sun. Sophia pressed her face against the window, exclaiming over the palm trees and colorful buildings. "It's so pretty," she declared. "Wait until you see the house," Julian said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. He glanced at Nadia. "I hope it meets with approval." She offered a neutral smile. "I'm sure it's lovely." Lovely proved an understatement. Julian's home was a modernist masterpiece, perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. Glass and stone merged seamlessly with the natural landscape. An infinity pool seemed to drop directly into the ocean below. "Wow," Sophia breathed as they pulled into the driveway. Nadia had to agree, though she kept her reaction more contained. The house was spectacular but also intimidating in its perfection. Inside, the decor was minimalist but warm. Natural materials, comfortable furnishings, massive windows framing breathtaking views. Nothing like the cold corporate aesthetic she might have expected. "I had the guest wing prepared for you both," Julian explained, leading them through the house. "Sophia's room is connected to yours by a shared bathroom." The guest rooms were beautiful, clearly prepared with thought. Sophia's room featured a child-sized bed with a canopy, a bookshelf stocked with children's titles in multiple languages, and a small desk with art supplies. "For me?" Sophia asked, eyes wide. "All for you," Julian confirmed. Nadia's room was equally thoughtful, elegant but comfortable, with a private terrace overlooking the sea. Fresh flowers sat on the bedside table, and she noticed the books on the shelf matched her reading preferences. "You remembered what I like to read," she observed quietly when Sophia was occupied exploring her new space. "I remember everything about you, Nadia." The simple statement hung between them, heavy with implication. "I'll let you both settle in," he said, stepping back. "Dinner whenever you're ready. No rush." Left alone, Nadia unpacked their suitcases, hanging clothes in the spacious closets. The domesticity of the action felt strange in Julian's home, as if they were playing at being a family rather than actually being one. Sophia, naturally adaptable, had no such reservations. She bounced on her bed, explored every drawer and closet, and declared the room the most beautifulest ever. Dinner was served on the terrace, the sunset painting the sky in dramatic oranges and pinks. Julian had arranged a child-friendly meal alongside more sophisticated options. Sophia chatted happily about the plane, the house, her plans to swim in the disappearing pool tomorrow. After she was tucked into bed, exhausted from travel and excitement, Julian offered Nadia a glass of wine on the main terrace. She settled in quickly, he observed, handing Nadia a glass of Spanish red. "Children are adaptable. And you? How are you feeling about being here?" Nadia sipped her wine, buying time. "It's strange. Being in Barcelona again. Being in your home. Good strange or bad strange? Just strange. This house, it's beautiful, Julian. Not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something colder, more corporate. This feels like a home." He smiled slightly. "I designed it myself. After my parents' house, which was all for show and no comfort, I wanted something that felt real. You've achieved that." They fell silent, watching the last light fade from the sky, stars emerging over the Mediterranean. "The last time we were in Barcelona together," Julian said carefully, "we were different people." "Yes, we were. I was different, colder, more focused on appearance than substance. And now? Now I know what matters. Who matters?" Nadia met his gaze across the terrace. 2 weeks of parenting doesn't make you an expert on what matters, Julian." "No," he agreed, "but 2 years of missing what I didn't know I had. That teaches some hard lessons." She couldn't argue with that. The week in Barcelona unfolded with unexpected ease. Mornings were spent by the pool, Sophia delighting in Julian's patient swimming lessons. Afternoons included gentle explorations of the city, the aquarium, Park Güell with its fantastical architecture, quiet plazas where Sophia could run while they sipped coffee. Julian proved to be a thoughtful host, never pushing for more intimacy than Nadia offered, while still making his feelings clear through. Small gestures, fresh coffee waiting when she woke, her favorite flowers refreshed daily, attentive listening when she spoke. 4 days into their visit, Julian proposed a special outing. "I'd like to take you both to my vineyard," he said over breakfast. "It's about an hour inland, beautiful countryside, very peaceful." "You have a vineyard?" Nadia asked, surprised. "A small one. It was my grandfather's originally. The only thing from my family I actually wanted to keep." The property was indeed beautiful. Rolling hills covered with neat rows of vines, a stone farmhouse. Renovated with simple elegance, olive trees providing shade over a rustic outdoor dining area. Sophia ran ahead, delighting in the open space. A caretaker's dog joined her, a gentle golden retriever that bore her enthusiastic petting with patient dignity. "This is lovely," Nadia admitted, as Julian gave her a tour of the main house. "So different from your corporate image." "This is the real me," he said quietly, "or at least the me I always wanted to be but was afraid to embrace." After lunch under the olive trees, Sophia grew drowsy in the warm afternoon sun. Julian carried her inside for a nap, returning to find Nadia still at the table, gazing out over the vineyard. "She's asleep," he reported, taking his seat again. Complete with the dog curled at her feet, Nadia smiled. "She'll want one when we get home now." "Would that be so terrible?" "No, not terrible. Just another responsibility." Julian hesitated, then reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Nadia, I need to ask you something." She tensed, but didn't withdraw her hand. "What? What do you want?" "From me, from us, from this situation we've found ourselves in." The directness of the question caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted. "Yes, you do. You might not want to say it, but you know." She pulled her hand away, standing to put distance between them. "It's not that simple, Julian. It could be, how? You live here. We live in Singapore. You run a global empire that demands your presence around the world. I have a career I've built from nothing. Sophia has a routine, stability. All of those are logistics, solvable problems. They're not just logistics," she argued. "They're realities." Julian stood, moving to stand before her. "The only reality that matters is this. I love you. I've never stopped loving you. And I think, despite everything, you still feel something for me too." The declaration hung between them, too significant to ignore. "Love isn't enough," she said finally. "Trust matters too. And you broke that once before. I know. I can't erase that. But I can ask for the chance to rebuild it. And if I can't give you that chance, then I'll respect your decision. I'll be the best co-parent I can be to Sophia. I'll never disappear from her life again. And us? I'll hope that time might change your mind. But I won't pressure you." Nadia turned away, looking out over the sunlit vineyard. Everything Julian said sounded perfect, too perfect perhaps. And therein lay her fear. She'd believed in him once before, only to be discarded when it became inconvenient. "I need time," she said finally. "This is all happening so fast." "We have 3 more days here," he reminded her gently. "No decisions need to be made today." She nodded, grateful for the reprieve. That evening, after returning to the main house and putting Sophia to bed, Nadia found herself restless. She wandered out to the infinity pool, sitting at its edge with her feet in the water, staring at the moonlight reflecting on the Mediterranean below. Julian found her there, approaching quietly so as not to startle her. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded, and he sat beside her, rolling up his pants to dip his feet in the water too. "It's beautiful here," she said after a while. "Peaceful." "Yes. That's why I chose it. Do you ever get lonely, in this big house, just you?" He considered the question. "Yes, more than I admitted to myself before Sophia." "Before seeing you again." They sat in companionable silence, the gentle lapping of water against the pool's edge the only sound. "I was so angry with you," Nadia said suddenly. "For so long. Not just for sending me away, but for making me feel disposable. You were never disposable to me. But you treated me like I was, like what happened between us was a problem to be solved rather than a connection to be honored." Julian nodded, accepting the criticism. "You're right. I did. I was a coward." "Yes, you were. I'm trying not to be anymore." She looked at him then, really looked at him in the moonlight. The Julian beside her now was both familiar and different. The same handsome features, the same intense presence, but with a vulnerability, a humility that had been absent before. "I believe you're trying," she admitted. "I'm just not sure if it's enough." He reached for her hand in the darkness. This time, she didn't pull away. "What would be enough?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. Proof that when things get difficult, really difficult, you won't resort to your old patterns, that you won't discard us when we become inconvenient again. How can I prove that except through time?" "You can't," she acknowledged. "That's the problem." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then give me time, Nadia. Let me show you, day by day, that I'm not the man I was 2 years ago." She didn't answer, but she didn't release his hand either. They sat together at the edge of the infinity pool, feet in the water, hands connected. The vast Mediterranean spread before them like possibility itself. Relationships that break apart and find their way back together often form a stronger bond in the healing. The cracks filled with new understanding can create something more beautiful than what existed before. If you believe that some loves deserve a second chance, that forgiveness can be the foundation for something stronger. Type love rebuilds in the comments. Now, let's see if Nadia and Julian can find their way back to each other, not as they were, but as who they've become. Their final day in Barcelona dawned clear and bright. Julian had arranged a special outing, a private sailing trip along the coast. Sophia was ecstatic, bouncing with excitement as they boarded the elegant yacht. "Look, Mama, I'm a sailor," she declared, wearing the captain's hat Julian had bought her. "Indeed you are," Nadia agreed, adjusting the child's life vest. The day was perfect. Gentle breezes, crystal waters, delicious food prepared by the yacht's chef. They anchored in a secluded cove where the water was calm and clear. Julian helped Sophia swim while wearing floaties, her delighted squeals echoing off the rocky cliffs surrounding them. Nadia watched from the deck, struck by how natural they looked together, father and daughter, as if they'd never been separated. "He's good with her," observed the yacht's captain, a weathered man who had worked for Julian for years. "Yes, he is," Nadia agreed. "Changed him, that little one," the captain continued. "Never seen the boss smile so much." The casual observation from someone who had known Julian long before she entered his life gave Nadia pause. Perhaps the change in him was more profound than she'd allowed herself to believe. That evening, after returning to the house and putting an exhausted Sophia to bed, Julian asked Nadia to join him for dinner on the main terrace. He had dismissed the staff, preparing the meal himself, a simple but elegant paella that surprised her with its quality. "I didn't know you could cook," she remarked. "There's a lot you don't know about me," he replied. "Just as there's much I still want to learn about you." The meal was accompanied by wine from his vineyard, the conversation flowing easily between them. They spoke of their childhoods, their dreams, the parts of themselves they rarely shared with others. "Why hotels?" Nadia asked. "Of all the businesses you could have built or inherited, why did you choose hospitality?" Julian considered the question thoughtfully. "Because hotels, at their best, create moments of beauty in people's lives. Memories, experiences. It's not just about luxury or comfort. It's about creating spaces where people feel seen, valued. That's not the answer I expected." "What did you expect?" "Something about profit margins and global expansion." He smiled. "Those matter too. But they're the means, not the end." As the evening deepened, stars appearing above them, Julian reached across the table to take her hand. "Tomorrow you leave," he said quietly. "Yes. I don't want you to go." The simple honesty of the statement touched her. "Julian, I know," he interrupted gently. "You have a life in Singapore. Sophia has school. You have your career. I'm not asking you to upend everything. Not yet." "Then what are you asking?" "For permission to court you properly, to visit regularly, to build something real between us, slowly, carefully, with intention." "Court me?" She couldn't help but smile. "That's an old-fashioned word." "I'm an old-fashioned man in some ways," he admitted. "At least, I'd like to be. The kind who honors commitments, who puts family first, who doesn't run when things get difficult." That doesn't sound like the Julian Rivero the business world knows. No, it doesn't. But perhaps it's who I've always been beneath the surface, waiting for the right reason to emerge. Nadia studied him in the candlelight, this man who had broken her heart, and was now asking, with humble determination, for the chance to heal it. "All right," she said finally. "We can try, slowly." The joy that transformed his features was almost painful to witness, raw, unguarded. Happiness that the controlled hotelier rarely allowed himself to display. "Thank you," he said, voice rough with emotion. He stood, still holding her hand, gently pulling her to her feet. Music began playing softly from hidden speakers, the same song that had been playing in the hotel kitchen the night they first came together. "You remember," she whispered, recognizing the melody. "I remember everything about that night. Every touch, every whisper." He drew her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other still holding hers. They began to move slowly, dancing under the stars on his terrace, the Mediterranean spreading endlessly before them. "I made so many mistakes, Nadia," he murmured against her hair. "The worst was letting you go." She rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "We both made choices, some better than others." They danced in silence for a while, relearning the feel of each other, the rhythm they could create together. When the song ended, Julian didn't release her. Instead, he tilted her chin up, meeting her eyes with a question in his. Nadia knew what he was asking. She had the power to pull away, to maintain the careful distance she'd established. Instead, she rose slightly on her toes, closing the space between them. Their lips met in a kiss that was both familiar and entirely new, tender where their first encounters had been passionate, patient where they had once been urgent. His hands remained respectfully at her waist, even as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I've waited 2 years to do that again," he admitted. "Was it worth the wait?" she asked, a hint of her old playfulness returning. "Every second." She stepped back slightly, creating space to think clearly. "This doesn't change our plan. We still need to take things slowly. Of course, I'm still going back to Singapore tomorrow. I know, and you'll visit in 2 weeks, as we discussed." He nodded. "I've already cleared my schedule." "Good," she said, then surprised him by stepping forward again, reclaiming his embrace. "Now kiss me again before I change my mind." He complied immediately, gathering her close as if she were precious beyond measure. This time the kiss held more heat, more promise, a glimpse of the passion they had once shared and might find again. The flight back to Singapore was both easier and harder than the journey to Barcelona. Easier because Sophia chatted happily about her adventures. Harder because Nadia's heart remained partly behind with Julian. He had driven them to the airport himself, helping with their luggage, entertaining Sophia while Nadia checked in. At security, where they would have to part, he knelt to Sophia's level. "I'll see you very soon, Princess," he promised, hugging her tightly. 2 weeks, she reminded him seriously. "You promised." 2 weeks, he confirmed. "I'll count every day." Standing, he faced Nadia, emotion clear in his eyes. "Safe travels. Thank you. For everything." He leaned in, kissing her briefly but tenderly. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. True to his word, Julian arrived in Singapore exactly 2 weeks later. This time he didn't stay in a hotel, but in a guest room at Nadia's apartment, a significant step that wasn't lost on either of them. Life began to find a new rhythm. Julian traveled constantly between Barcelona and Singapore, never going more than 2 weeks without seeing them. When business kept him away, he video called daily, reading Sophia bedtime stories from hotel rooms across the world, sending small gifts that showed he was thinking of them. With Nadia, he was patient, respectful, letting her set the pace of their rekindling relationship. Sometimes they shared nothing more than conversation after Sophia was asleep. Other times, when the connection between them grew too powerful to deny, they rediscovered each other with a passion made deeper by their separation and reconciliation. 3 months into their carefully managed relationship, Julian arrived in Singapore with a proposal, not of marriage, not yet, but of a future together. "I've purchased a home here," he told Nadia one evening after Sophia was asleep. "Nothing extravagant but comfortable. Close to Sophia's school and your office." "You're moving to Singapore?" she asked, surprised. "Part-time, initially. I've restructured the company's leadership to allow me to work remotely more frequently. Eventually, perhaps full-time, if that's what we decide is best." "Julian, your entire life is in Barcelona." "No," he corrected gently. "My house is in Barcelona. My company headquarters is in Barcelona. My life is wherever you and Sophia are." The significance of his choice, prioritizing them over the empire he'd built, wasn't lost on Nadia. "I don't expect you to move in with me," he clarified. "Not unless or until you're ready. But I wanted to show you that I'm committed to being here, to being present, to building something real with you both." Nadia was speechless, moved by the gesture in a way she hadn't anticipated. "Will you at least come see it?" he asked. "Tell me if you like it, if you can imagine a future there someday." She nodded, not trusting her voice. The house Julian had purchased was indeed perfect. A spacious, but not ostentatious villa with a garden for Sophia to play in, a pool for swimming lessons, rooms filled with natural light. He had left it mostly unfurnished. "I thought," he explained as they toured the empty rooms, "that if someday you decided to make this a home with me, we could choose everything together. Make it ours, not just mine." In the master bedroom, with its terrace overlooking the garden, Nadia turned to him, overwhelmed by emotion. "You're really doing this," she said. "Changing your life for us." "For us," he agreed. "For myself, too. For the man I want to be rather than the man I thought I needed to be." She stepped into his arms then, holding him tightly. "I'm still scared," she admitted against his chest. "Of what?" "Of believing in this, in us. Of letting myself hope and then being disappointed again." He stroked her hair gently. I can't promise we'll never face challenges, Nadia, but I can promise I won't run from them. I won't push you away when things get difficult. I'm here, fully present, for whatever comes next. She looked up at him, searching his eyes for any hint of reservation or doubt. Finding none, she made a decision. Ask me again, she said quietly. Ask you what? Ask me if I can imagine a future here. With you. Understanding dawned in his eyes. He cupped her face gently between his hands. Nadia Kazan, can you imagine building a life with me, creating a home together, raising our daughter as a family? She covered his hands with hers, a smile breaking through the tears that had gathered in her eyes. Yes, she whispered. I can imagine it. I want it. His kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise more binding than any contract he'd ever signed. They told Sophia the next day, explaining in simple terms that Julian would be living in Singapore more often now, in a new house where they would all spend time together. Like a family? Sophia asked, cutting to the heart of the matter with a child's directness. Yes, Nadia confirmed, glancing at Julian. Like a family? Does that mean Julian is my daddy now? For real? The question hung in the air, weighted with significance. Julian knelt before his daughter, taking her small hands in his. Sophia, he said carefully, I have always been your father. From the very beginning, even when I didn't know it. But yes, now I'll be your daddy for real, every day, if that's what you want. She considered this with surprising seriousness for a 3-year-old, then nodded once. I want that. Then that's what will be, he promised. The transition wasn't without challenges. Julian still needed to travel for business. Nadia maintained her independence, continuing her career. Sophia tested boundaries, as children do when family dynamics shift. But the foundation they built was strong, stronger perhaps because it had been broken once before and carefully, intentionally reconstructed. 6 months after Julian's move to Singapore, he proposed properly, on the terrace of their now furnished home, with Sophia as his assistant, proudly holding a small velvet box. I've done this all backward, he admitted, kneeling before Nadia. Found you, lost you, created a child with you, rebuilt a relationship. But I want to do this part right. The ring was perfect, not ostentatiously large as his old self might have. Chosen, but elegantly simple, a diamond flanked by 2 smaller sapphires. The blue ones are for me and Daddy, Sophia explained importantly. Because we both love you most. Tears filled Nadia's eyes as she looked from her daughter to Julian, this man who had broken her heart and then, against all odds, earned the right to hold it again. Will you marry me, Nadia? Julian asked, voice rough with emotion. Not because of Sophia, not because it's expected, but because I love you more than I ever thought possible. Because I want to build a life with you, face whatever comes together, grow, old watching our daughter become the amazing woman she's destined to be. Yes, Nadia whispered, then louder. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Sophia clapped her hands with delight then, wrapped her arms around both their necks, pulling them into a family embrace. Later that night, with Sophia asleep and the house quiet around them, Julian and Nadia stood on their terrace, looking out at the Singapore skyline. Are you happy? He asked, arms wrapped around her from behind. Happier than I ever expected to be again, she admitted, leaning back against his chest. I don't deserve this second chance, he said quietly, but I promise to honor it every day. She turned in his arms, facing him. We both deserve happiness, Julian. Sometimes the path to finding it isn't straight. Sometimes we have to get lost before we can truly be found. He kissed her then, a kiss that held their past, their present, and their future, the night in Barcelona that had changed everything. The years of separation, the reunion that had begun with shock and ended with forgiveness, and the promise of all the days to come. Sometimes life brings us full circle, returning us to places we've been before but with new eyes to see what we missed the first time. Julian and Nadia's journey reminds us that love doesn't always get it right the first time. Sometimes it needs to break and heal, to lose and find, before it becomes the love we truly deserve. If this story has touched your heart, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances, and subscribe to Love and Twilights for more stories that remind us of love's enduring power to transform us. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to find your way back to what matters most.